Actually, the groom slept with me, Yolanda said excitedly, as if she might shout yay after. The room exploded into chaos. I saw my parents sitting at a nearby table, looking like they were about to faint. Even with all the commotion around me, my mind suddenly felt calm. Barry slept with Yolanda? No way. That can't be true because he... My name is Melissa McCarthy. I'm a typical 28-year-old. I graduated from a decent college and now work in a clerical job at a big trading company. I'm not a failure, but I've always been average in everything. My grades were average, my sports abilities were average, and my social life was average. I didn't have any major problems, but there was nothing really special about me either. This didn't change as I got older. I try hard at work, but my performance is average, and my housekeeping skills are average too. Looking back, my childhood was pretty normal too. Typical middle class, with parents who had regular jobs. I went to college on a scholarship and am still paying it back every month. I'm not unhappy about it, and I'm really grateful to my parents for raising me. Still, my whole life has been completely ordinary. My best friend, Yolanda Foster, has had a life totally different from mine. Yolanda and I work at the same company and became friends because we were the only two women in our department when we started. We went from just being close to becoming true friends because of her personality. Unlike me, Yolanda is cheerful and sociable. She never gets shy around people. She graduated from a prestigious university and was even a runner-up in a beauty contest. Her family is wealthy and they own a company, but she's not stuck up at all. She's confident and dates handsome guys from top companies. She's good at her job and always gets attention because of her charm. She's also considerate and proactive. She's different from me. Maybe I'm just jealous of Yolanda, even though I consider her my best friend. Thinking about how different we are always makes me feel uneasy. With a sigh, I press the enter key harder than necessary. After 5 years at the company, even though I'm not very efficient, I'm used to the work. So even when I'm lost in thought, my fingers keep typing on the keyboard. Then I feel a light tap on the back of my head. Hey Melissa, what's with the sigh? It didn't hurt, but feeling frustrated, I turned around in my chair, rubbing the back of my head. Yolanda was standing there with a rolled-up document in her hand. Yolanda, seriously, you haven't made any progress with your work. You're so inefficient. Lunch is in 30 minutes. Yolanda peeks at my desk and comments with a look of exasperation. I'm used to hearing this, but today it stings a bit. Wow, is it that late already? I need to hurry. I checked the clock in a panic and got back to work. I have to finish this by 3:00 p.m. Hey, where are we going for lunch? Oh, sorry, I don't have time for lunch today. What? You're behind on your work? Come on, let's go. The Italian place on Oak Street. Wait, but I really don't have time. Before I can finish, Yolanda is already gone, walking briskly out of the office, probably heading to the restroom. Her neatly curled chestnut hair sways behind her slim back. Several male employees stop working to watch her leave. She's so pushy. That's her spoiled side showing. I think to myself, feeling it's no wonder I complain. Yolanda's bad habit is not listening to others, but I know she means well. Maybe she's trying to cheer me up and take me out for a change of pace since I'm clearly struggling with my work. I pull myself together and focus on my work for the next 30 minutes until lunch break. Yolanda's favorite Italian restaurant is a 5-minute walk from the office. It's a stylish place with delicious food, quite different from the typical lunch spots for office ladies, fitting for someone like Yolanda. A $30 lunch, I would never come here alone. I really want a boyfriend. We're 28 already, right? It's about time to get married and leave the company. Oh, Melissa, you have a boyfriend, right? Despite her casual tone, she skillfully handles the knife and fork. I twirl some pasta around my fork, impressed by her upbringing showing through in moments like this. Yeah, I do, I reply, suddenly remembering something. Oh right, I'm getting married next month. As I continue in the same tone, Yolanda's smooth movements come to a sudden halt. What? Yolanda's surprised voice drowns out the elegant classical music playing in the background. Wait, I didn't know about that. When did this happen? Well, he just proposed last week, and I haven't had the chance to tell you yet, I explained. So, what kind of guy is your boyfriend? I don't think I've ever heard about him before, Yolanda asked, glaring at me with her eyes framed by thick lashes. Even though she says she hasn't heard about him, it's because she never listened to my stories before. I'm used to this by now, so I brush off my irritation with a sigh and start telling her about my boyfriend. He graduated from the best university in the country and works at a top company. We've been dating for 2 years since we met at work, and it's been a calm and steady relationship. Being with him makes me feel secure, and most importantly, I can be myself around him. But as I got closer to turning 30, I started to worry about whether we would keep dating forever or get married. Then, just as I was thinking about it, he proposed. So, Yolanda, I was wondering if you could give a speech at the wedding. Would you? I asked, telling Yolanda something I had been thinking about since the proposal. She seemed a bit hesitant, but she agreed. Knowing Yolanda, she might not be thrilled that her best friend is getting married before her. But as I naively thought this, I didn't notice the tense look on Yolanda's face. On the wedding day, Yolanda came to the waiting room before the ceremony started. Congratulations, Melissa. She walked in with a smile, looking so beautiful she could outshine the bride. Since my groom, Barry, was there, I thought it was a good time to introduce them. Thank you, Yolanda. This is my husband, Barry. Barry, this is my best friend, Yolanda. Nice to meet you. I'm Barry Klein. Melissa has told me a lot about you. Thank you for coming today, Barry said, smiling warmly at Yolanda and nodding his head. Nice to meet you. I'm Yolanda Foster. Melissa, when did you catch such a handsome guy? She said in her usual tone, smiling back at Barry. I expected her to hang around and chat, but she left the room quickly. I felt uneasy about how she was acting. What's going on? Yolanda has been acting distant since I told her about the wedding. As I stared at the door Yolanda left through, lost in thought, Barry murmured, "What's up with her?" Huh. I looked up and saw him with a puzzled expression, his hand on his chin like he was thinking deeply. When I asked what was wrong, he said he also felt something was off with Yolanda. When she saw my face, she looked surprised for a moment. Have we met somewhere before? Even as he said that, he didn't seem to remember anything. Yolanda is a striking beauty, so it's unlikely he's confusing her with someone else. Though we both felt something was off, we couldn't find an answer, and the wedding reception began. The large venue was filled with round tables, and everyone, both familiar and unfamiliar, wore smiles. As I looked around the room from the head table, the reality of getting married slowly sank in. I had always thought I'd never get married, and I'd live an ordinary life, with ordinary day-to-day existence. I didn't know if not getting married was normal or not, but I had always imagined I'd live alone until I met Barry. The reception was going smoothly, and it was time for the friend's speech. I anxiously looked at Yolanda. She stood up gracefully and walked towards us, her heels clicking on the floor. Wow, she's gorgeous. Is she a celebrity? Among the whispers I heard, I felt proud of the compliments Yolanda was getting, instead of feeling inferior like I usually do. Today, I looked up at Yolanda as she stood at the microphone, feeling unusually calm. She looked even more beautiful than usual today. I hope she finds a good guy soon, though it might be hard for her to choose because she's so picky. As I was thinking that, she suddenly looked at me with a mischievous glint in her eye. Melissa, congratulations. I was debating whether to say this, but I don't want to hide anything from my best friend. I don't want it to come out after the wedding and cause trouble, so I'll say it now. With that introduction, Yolanda smiled brightly. The room started to buzz. My calm heart was suddenly thrown into chaos. What is she going to say? When I turned to look at Barry, he looked just as confused. Barry glanced at me as if he had no idea what was happening. In hindsight, I should have stopped Yolanda then. Actually, the groom slept with me. Yolanda said it with so much excitement that it sounded like she might say, "Yay." Afterward, the room went into chaos. I saw my parents at a nearby table looking like they were about to faint. Despite all the chaos around me, my mind became calm. Barry slept with Yolanda? No way. That can't be true because hey. Yolanda, what are you talking about? I asked. Sorry, you know I can't keep secrets. It's exactly what I said. We slept together, Yolanda replied. That's impossible, I said. Yolanda's beautiful face twisted into a mocking smile, and it was no longer beautiful at all. It's impossible because my husband, I'm gay, Barry said at the same time I did. The microphone picked up Yolanda's shocked voice. The room was in an uproar, and it was hard to tell who was saying what. Yolanda stood there stunned. The speech was no longer the focus. At that moment, the door swung open with a bang, and a man burst in. Barry, sorry I'm late. The man at the entrance looked exactly like the groom. Yolanda looked back and forth between the man and Barry, speechless. Glad I made it, but what's with the mood here? The man asked. The man walked toward us, puzzled by the atmosphere. As he approached, he noticed Yolanda and called out, Hey, long time no see. What are you doing here? He raised his hand and greeted Yolanda casually. Wait a minute. 2 Barrys? What's going on? Yolanda, who had been so confident moments ago, now sat down weakly, finally understanding the situation. I got up and walked over to Yolanda. Actually, Fred and my husband Barry are identical twins. At first glance, they look like the same person, but if you look closely, you can see their different personalities in their eyes. Barry, the older brother, has gentle eyes, while his younger brother, Fred, has a mischievous look. But unless you're close to them, it's hard to tell them apart. Unlike his brother, Fred graduated from high school and has been working part-time since. He's sociable and good at interviews, but he keeps quitting jobs and looking for new ones. Fred also has a complicated relationship with women. He often pretends to be his brother and dates multiple women, causing trouble for Barry. However, because Fred is likable and Barry is forgiving, they have a good relationship. Yolanda. I gently placed my hand on Yolanda's shoulder as she sat on the floor dejected. Yolanda had made a shocking confession at my wedding. In the end, it was a misunderstanding, and she ended up embarrassing herself, but she tried to ruin my happiness. However, I didn't know what to feel towards her. After all, this was the first time I had seen her so crushed. I realized now that I had always admired Yolanda, who was full of confidence despite everything. I'm sorry for the disturbance. That was a prank planned by her and me. I'm not good at such things, and I apologize for the awkward atmosphere. Barry tried to smooth things over. The room, which had been buzzing, gradually calmed down, and I could hear people murmuring. So it was a prank. Regardless of how well he handled it, he was trying to look out for Yolanda, who had embarrassed herself in front of everyone. But it is true that I am gay, and it is also true that I love Melissa. From there, Barry spoke confidently. Yes, Barry is gay. When we got to know each other and started to grow closer, he told me himself. I was surprised and shocked, but he told me he still wanted to be with me. Despite having only been attracted to men, Barry grew to love me as a person beyond gender. It's a little different from romantic love, but he respects me deeply as a soulmate and as a person. His feelings settled into my heart. It was certainly shocking to have my previous notions overturned, but love is not only about romance. I felt a growing desire to respond to his feelings. I decided to love everything about him, his career, his good looks, his pure-hearted nature, and the fact that he sincerely faced his identity as a gay man while loving me. When Barry finished his speech, the room was filled with warm applause. Looking at my parents, I saw my father clapping hard with tears in his eyes and my mother pressing a tissue to her eyes. Dad, Mom, I'm going to be happy with him. The ceremony smoothly moved on to the entertainment portion. As I was about to ask Yolanda to return to her seat, she shook off my hand and whispered weakly, What is this? This is stupid. I'm leaving. Yolanda. She staggered to her feet and walked unsteadily toward the exit. I couldn't bring myself to follow her. On her way out, Yolanda passed by Fred, who had been sitting during Barry's speech. He called out to her. "Oh, you're leaving already? Oh, what's your name again? I forgot, but let's hang out again. I don't need a girlfriend right now, just friends." That was the final blow for Yolanda. "Oh man," she cried out like a child and dashed out of the venue. Yolanda. I called after her, but she didn't look back. Somehow the ceremony ended successfully, and Barry and I went on our honeymoon. After a long break, when I returned to work, Yolanda was gone. I heard that she had requested a transfer right after our wedding. While I felt a bit let down, I was also somewhat relieved because it would have been awkward to face her. So what happened to Yolanda after that? It seemed she was so shocked by being deceived by Fred that her flashy lifestyle completely changed. She had been manipulating men and cheating without a care, but when she was the one betrayed, she quickly developed a distrust of men. Time has passed since then, and now several years have gone by since I turned 30. Yolanda is still single and hasn't been able to get married. Furthermore, the story of her speech at my wedding spread among our colleagues, and the people who used to fawn over her became distant. Her prideful nature meant even the younger colleagues didn't warm up to her, leaving her completely isolated and in the position of an office queen bee. As for me, I've drifted apart from Yolanda since the wedding, but I continue to work and live happily with Barry. Though we sleep in separate bedrooms, our hearts are undeniably close, and we can proudly say that we are each other's only partner. Marrying Barry made me realize what true love is for the first time. I look back and wonder what those days of lamenting about my ordinary life were for, as I am now so incredibly happy every single day.
My life is pretty straightforward. I'm all about fitness, health, and apparently, drama. At 26, I'm juggling my career as a fitness trainer and managing my health blog. That's where I met Mark at the sports center. What began as a casual connection quickly blossomed into something special. He has this vibe that's hard to ignore, and before we knew it, we were caught up in what you might call whirlwind romance. Let me set the scene for you. It was a scorching summer day, and I was about to meet Mark's family for the first time. I felt a mix of nerves and excitement, dressed in a simple knee-length dress with short sleeves. Nothing flashy, but apparently enough to stir the pot. Mark had warned me that his family was a bit traditional and protective. He mentioned his mom, Linda, in a tone that left me puzzled. "She has strong opinions, but don't take it to heart," he said, oblivious to the fact that those were more like red flags than reassurances. As we stepped into their family home, Mark's younger brother, Alex, greeted us with a hearty smile. Then came Linda. The atmosphere shifted dramatically. It felt like the temperature dropped a few degrees. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, lingering on my arms. "Is this how you dress to meet your future mother-in-law?" she asked, her voice icy. A bit bold, don't you think? I was taken aback, scrambling for the right words. Mark squeezed my hand, a silent show of support. "Well, it's summer, and it's pretty hot outside. I thought this outfit was decent and comfortable," I managed to say. "Comfortable or not, it's about first impressions," Linda shot back. I would have expected something more appropriate. Mark jumped in to smooth things over. "Mom, it's really hot today. Erica looks fine. Let's not start off on the wrong foot." But Linda wouldn't let it go. "I'm just saying, Mark, it's about respect. But fine, let's have dinner." Dinner turned into a tense affair, the conversations around me feeling superficial while Linda's earlier remarks loomed overhead like a dark cloud. Alex tried to lighten the mood with jokes and stories, and I was grateful for his effort. Mark kept giving me reassuring looks, but I could sense the damage was done. After dinner, while I was helping with the dishes, Linda cornered me in the kitchen. "Listen, dear, I'm just looking out for my son. He's a good boy, and I don't want him to make a mistake." I was floored. "A mistake? Linda, I love Mark. I'm not here to play games. I don't know what gave you a bad impression, but that's not me." She shook her head. "We'll see. Time tells all truths." The ride home was quiet, and Mark apologized for his mom's behavior, though I could tell he was upset too. "She can be protective, but this is too much." I sighed and leaned back in the seat. "It's okay, Mark, but if this is how it's going to be, we have a rocky road ahead." As wedding planning began in earnest, Mark and I were all in, picking out decorations, tasting cakes, and finding the perfect attire. I fell in love with a stunning dress, sleek and just a bit revealing, but nothing outrageous, or so I thought until Linda caught a glimpse. "You plan on wearing that in front of the whole family?" she blurted out. "It looks like you're aiming for a beach party rather than a wedding." I tried to laugh it off. "It's just modern, Linda. Plus, it'll be a warm day, and I want to feel comfortable." Mark squeezed my hand, a signal to avoid a battle we couldn't win, but Linda's frown said it all. She muttered something about tradition and decency as she walked off. I thought, if a dress could stir the pot, what lay ahead? After that initial clash with Linda, things settled into a tense routine. I threw myself into work and my blog, which became my sanctuary, my space where I felt in control and could share my passion for fitness and health. It never crossed my mind that this very passion would stir the pot once again. One evening, Mark and I were lounging on the couch during a rare moment of downtime when he suddenly frowned, scrolling through his phone. "Babe, we need to talk," he said, his tone serious. I sat up, alarmed. "What's up?" He handed me his phone, revealing my Instagram profile. In the comments of my latest post were a mix of supportive and flirty messages. Totally normal, in my opinion. Okay, I was confused. "It's just Instagram, Mark. People comment. That's how it works." "Yeah, but my mom is making a big deal out of it," he replied, frustration creeping into his voice. "She's convinced you're inviting attention." Anger surged through me. "Are you kidding me? It's Instagram, for crying out loud." I snatched the phone from him and scrolled through the comments. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, yet Linda had twisted it into something sordid. "So what am I supposed to do? Police who comments on my posts?" I shot back. "No, of course not, but maybe we could limit who can comment until this blows over." His suggestion was well-meaning but infuriating. "So, I have to censor my account because your mom has a twisted view of me?" Hell no, that's not happening. Fast forward through the Instagram saga, where Linda twisted my every move into scandal. Things got stickier when Alex, bless him, began giving me rides home from work since his office was just a block from the gym. It was innocent convenience, but not in Linda's eyes. During a family dinner, with tension thick in the air, she leaned in with her usual insinuations. "Nice of Alex to play chauffeur, isn't it?" Mark's jaw tensed, and I noticed Alex stiffen beside him. "Mom, what are you implying?" Mark's voice had that warning edge, but Linda was on a roll. "Oh, nothing. Just making conversation," she replied, feigning innocence while her eyes darted between me and Alex. The atmosphere was like a lit fuse. "Stop it, Mom. You're out of line," Alex snapped, clearly at his limit. The argument escalated from there, with Mark caught in the middle, torn between his brother and his mother's accusations. The drive home was silent, the weight of the accusations heavy in the air. I couldn't believe Linda would stoop so low, using Alex's kindness as a weapon against me. The entire mess with Linda reached a boiling point, and I could only wonder how we would navigate the storm ahead. I never imagined it would come to this, but after Linda's latest stunt, accusing me of cheating because Alex offered me a few rides home, I hit my breaking point. I told Mark outright, "Your mom is not welcome in our house anymore. I can't take this anymore. She's crossed too many lines. You'd think I had declared war." Linda erupted when she heard about the ban, but honestly, I was beyond caring. Her constant digs and accusations were one thing, but what happened next was a real gut punch. A couple of months later, I found out I was pregnant. What should have been a joyous revelation turned to chaos when Linda decided to spin a new tale. She told Mark, "How do you know that child is yours? With all those men at her gym, who knows?" Hearing that venom come from his own mother felt like a knife in my gut. I could see the doubt creep into Mark's eyes, a look that shattered the solid bond we once shared. One night, after overhearing yet another of their phone calls, I confronted Mark. "So what? You think I'm cheating? That this baby isn't yours?" My voice was sharp, tinged with hurt and anger. Mark looked torn, a shadow of himself. "I don't know what to think anymore, Erica. My mom has all these ideas. And you're going to take her word over mine? Over everything we've built together?" I interrupted, disbelief coloring my tone. He didn't answer, shuffling his feet and avoiding my gaze. That silence spoke volumes more than any argument could. Things grew colder between us after that. Conversations became clipped and filled with tension. It was like living with a stranger. The joy of our upcoming baby was overshadowed by this cloud of suspicion and doubt. When our baby boy finally arrived, with his fair hair and bright blue eyes, I thought maybe things would start to look up. But I couldn't have been more wrong. As he grew, his features became even more pronounced, making him the spitting image of a golden-haired angel. The problem? Mark, my husband, was as brunette and dark-eyed as they come, giving Linda even more ammunition for her relentless accusations. In a last-ditch effort to quell the ridiculousness, I dug up old childhood photos to show both Linda and Mark. "Look," I said, pointing to a picture of me at 5, blonde and blue-eyed just like our son. "It's genetics, Linda. Can't you see the resemblance?" But Linda merely sniffed, unimpressed, her eyes narrowing. "Convenient, isn't it, that your genes decided to pop up now? And Alex being blonde doesn't help your case." Mark stood there, caught in the middle, his face a mix of confusion and hurt. The tension was unbearable. Things reached a breaking point at our son's first birthday party. With all the guests cooing over the baby, Linda couldn't help but make a scene. "This child looks nothing like my son. Everyone can see it. We need a DNA test to prove who the father really is," she announced loudly, making everyone uncomfortable. I was livid, my face burning with embarrassment and anger. "Are you out of your mind, Linda? Accusing me in front of everyone? No way am I doing some tests just because your paranoia has gone off the rails." My voice dripped with indignation. It was humiliating to be accused like that, especially in front of friends and family. But then Mark intervened, just not in the way I had hoped. "Actually, we're doing it," he said, his voice cold, a hardness in his eyes that I had never seen before. "If you've got nothing to hide, then there's no issue. We'll do the test, or we're done. I can't be married to someone I don't trust." I was floored. "Are you serious? You're choosing your mom's crazy accusations over me, over your son?" He didn't budge, not even flinching at my words. "It's not just my mom. There's too much doubt, too much talk. The test will clear things up one way or another, and until then..." My heart was in my throat, dreading his next words. "Pack your bags. Stay somewhere else. I can't look at you. Not now, not with these doubts." His words cut through me, leaving a chilling emptiness in their wake. So there I was, packing my things in a rage, my hands shaking with a mix of fury and hurt. Our baby boy, blissfully unaware, watched with wide, innocent eyes as his world, and mine, crumbled. I left, heading to the only place I could think of, my mom's. She was waiting with open arms. When I arrived at my mom's house, I barely made it through the door before I broke down. "He kicked us out, Mom, over some DNA tests. Linda convinced him we need it." My mother's fury flared instantly. "I'll go over there and give Mark a piece of my mind, over my dead body." But I stopped her. "No, it's not worth it. Not right now." That night, I replayed every moment in my mind, trying to pinpoint where it all went wrong. How had we gone from being so in love to questioning our baby's paternity, and Alex caught up in this mess for no reason other than Linda's spite? The fallout from my son's first birthday party had been swift. News of Linda's accusations spread like wildfire, and it felt as if the entire city was whispering behind my back before the party favors were even picked up. My friends, my mom's friends, even the neighbors who had watched me grow up, they were all talking. It felt like I was living in a nightmare. Fed up and desperate to clear my name, I decided to go through with the DNA test. I picked up the phone and called Mark, my voice steady despite my trembling hands. "I'll do the test." I cut straight to the chase. There was a pause on the other end, then Mark replied, his voice unnervingly calm. "I knew you'd come around. It's for the best." When I arrived at the clinic, I was a bundle of nerves. Mark looked like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, and to my surprise, so was Alex. "Why is he here?" I asked, my voice edged with irritation as I nodded toward my brother. Mark didn't meet my gaze. "There's been talk that you and Alex, he's getting tested too." My blood boiled at the implication. "You think I'd cheat on you with your brother? That's how little you trust me." Before Mark could respond, the specialist called us in, momentarily breaking the tension. Inside, the specialist laid it out clearly. Determining paternity could get complicated when potential fathers were siblings. "We'll need additional samples from everyone involved, including you, Erica, to ensure accuracy." So we each gave our samples, lost in our thoughts. Alex looked mortified. Mark appeared conflicted. And me, I was just angry. Angry that it had come to this, angry at Linda, and angry at Mark for allowing his mother's paranoia to escalate so far. Once the tests were done, we were told it would be a couple of weeks before we got the results. Those weeks dragged on, each day a torturous reminder of the uncertainty looming over our future. I didn't sit idle though. I made a few calls and spoke to a man who promised he could help with a delicate matter. I didn't know if it would lead anywhere, but I had to try something. Finally, the day arrived for the grand reveal. The tension in Linda's living room felt almost tangible, wrapping its icy fingers around my heart. My son clutched my hand, sensing the storm brewing but oblivious to its cause. Ever the self-appointed master of ceremonies, Linda dramatically sliced open the envelope containing the DNA test results, her anticipation palpable as she hoped for a scandal that would validate her accusations. But the moment she peeked inside, her expression faltered and disappointment washed over her. "The father is Mark," she announced, her voice losing its usual sharpness. Mark, who had been a bundle of nerves, visibly relaxed, a smug smile spreading across his face as he turned to me. "Well, there you have it. No harm done, right? You can come back home now." His words ignited a fierce mix of disbelief and anger within me, and I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "Come back after all this? You must be joking." He blinked, taken aback by my reaction. "But you're innocent, Erica. Isn't that what you wanted?" That's when I played my hand, pulling out the divorce papers I had kept hidden away. The silence that followed was deafening as I laid them on the table. Mark's face went from confident to pale, sheer panic taking over. "What's this? Why divorce papers?" I replied, the words tasting like freedom, and then I produced the photos, undeniable proof of Mark's infidelity captured in vivid detail by the private detective I had secretly hired. Watching him transform from confident to broken was almost pitiful. He started to babble apologies, his earlier bravado crumbling away. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Please let's talk about this." "Talk?" I scoffed, my voice cold. "You dragged my name through the mud and let your mother accuse me of the worst. All the while, you were the one cheating. There's nothing to talk about." Linda, who had been relishing the drama, now tried to intervene, her earlier eagerness replaced by desperation. "Now, dear, let's all calm down. We can fix this." "Fix this?" I cut her off sharply. "Your son is a cheat, and you're no better for stirring this trouble based on lies." After I laid out the proof of Mark's betrayal for all to see, the room became a battleground of broken bonds and shattered illusions. Linda couldn't tear her eyes away from the photos spread across the coffee table, each one a testament to betrayal. "I'm not just walking away, Mark. I will be demanding alimony and compensation for this treachery," I declared, my voice steady yet seething with anger. Mark's face drained of color, his earlier bravado evaporating into thin air. "You can't be serious," he stammered, looking from the photos to his mother, searching for some kind of refuge. Linda, ever the matriarch, attempted to regain control. "Oh please, she was never right for you. She would have cheated on you sooner or later. You're better off without her." That's when Alex, who had been simmering quietly with rage, exploded. "Enough." His voice echoed off the walls. "I'm done with all of this, with both of you." He pointed at his mother and brother. "After everything you put her through based on nothing but your twisted suspicions, I'm out." Linda turned to him, her face a mask of shock and desperation. "Alex, please don't say that. I was just trying to protect our family." "Protect?" he scoffed, his scorn palpable. "Is that what you call this? Destroying relationships and spreading lies? I can't be part of this family if this is what it stands for. I'm moving to another city and starting fresh, away from all this madness." Later, as I relayed the events to my mom, her words provided a cold comfort. That's the price of Linda's folly. Her arrogance and stupidity cost her her own sons. Maybe now she'll see the harm she's caused. The fallout was immediate and absolute. Alex followed through on his promise, moving away and cutting ties. Mark was left to face the consequences of his actions, with his mother's manipulations creating a chasm too wide to bridge between them. Life after the dust settled was different, not easier, but clearer, like I was seeing everything for the first time again. My mom and I had many long talks about it, sitting on her old comfy sofa with cups of tea that always seemed to go cold before we finished. "Mom," I started one evening, the sky outside painted with calm I didn't quite feel inside. "Do you think I made the right choice with everything? The divorce? Standing up to Linda and Mark like that? My mom set her cup down, looking at me with those wise eyes that had seen more of life than I ever wished to. Darling, you did what you had to do. You stood up for yourself, for your dignity. That's more important than staying in a marriage built on distrust. The biggest change, besides the obvious, was Alex's departure. He called me once just before leaving. I can't stay here, not after everything. I need to start fresh somewhere where every corner doesn't remind me of all this. I understand, I said. You'll always have a friend in me, Alex. You were the only one who really saw me through this mess. He chuckled, the sound holding a shadow of our shared troubles. You take care of yourself, all right? After hanging up, I felt a pang of loss, not just for the relationship I thought I had with Mark, but for the family I thought I belonged to. Months passed and life found a new rhythm. My blog started gaining traction, becoming a space where I could share not just fitness and health tips, but also personal stories of resilience and starting over. It resonated with people more than I expected. As I settled into this new chapter of my life, finding solace in the routine I'd built for me and my son, my phone rang out of the blue one afternoon. The screen flashed a name I hadn't seen in a while, Linda. My initial instinct was to ignore it, let it go to voicemail. But something, maybe curiosity or a desire to finally put it all to rest, made me answer. Hello. Her voice came through shaky and laced with regret. Erica, I was wondering, could I see him? My grandson. The audacity of her request stopped me cold. I was transported back to that living room, feeling the weight of her accusations all over again. You've got some nerve, Linda, I said, my voice steady but firm. After all the hell you put us through, now you want to play grandma? You didn't even want to see him before. She started to cry, mumbling apologies between sobs, trying to explain herself. But I wasn't having any of it. Save your tears, Linda. It's too late for sorry. But please, I just want to make things right, she pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. I sighed, a deep, weary sigh. You should have thought of that before you made your bed. Now you get to lie in it alone. Without waiting for her response, I hung up. The finality of the click echoed through me. It was harsh, but necessary. A line had been drawn, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control of where things were headed. Looking at my son, now a little older and wiser beyond his years, I knew we were going to be okay. We had each other, and a future that was ours to shape. I lay on the cold kitchen floor, holding my side where I felt sharp pain spreading through my body. It felt like a knife was twisting inside me. My 7-year-old daughter, Lily, stood nearby, her small face showing how scared she was. Mommy, are you okay? Lily's voice shook, barely louder than a whisper. I tried to sound calm despite the pain. I'll be fine, honey, just a bad stomach ache, I lied, trying to hide how serious it was. Footsteps echoed through the hallway as my husband David appeared in the doorway. His face showed annoyance instead of concern. He was ready for his trip, holding his suitcase. What's going on, Evelyn? Why are you on the floor? David asked, sounding annoyed. I think it's appendicitis, David. It's really bad. We need to go to the hospital, I managed to say, each word hurting me. He scoffed. Appendicitis? You're probably overreacting. It's likely just indigestion. But David, I really think. My words were cut off by a sharp pain, making me wince. David checked his watch, clearly impatient. I can't miss this trip with Rachel. Just call a taxi or something. I couldn't believe it. David, I can't even move. Lily's here. I need you, I begged, desperation in my voice. He shook his head, not caring. I'm sure it's nothing. Call if it gets worse. And with that, he left, his suitcase trailing behind him. I was left alone in pain with Lily. Lily's small hands found mine, her tears matching my own. Mommy, don't be sick. You have to be okay. I gathered what little strength I had and pulled Lily close. I'm here, darling. Mommy's here. With David gone, I knew I had to act. With shaking hands, I grabbed my phone and called the only person I knew I could count on, my brother Michael. The phone rang, its sound piercing the quiet kitchen. Hello, Michael's voice came through, a beacon of hope. Michael, it's Evelyn. I need help. I think it's appendicitis. I can't move and Lily is scared. I managed to say, each word a struggle. There was a brief silence, then Michael's voice, calm and steady. I'm on my way. Hold tight, Evelyn. I'll be there soon. Leaning against the cold tile floor, I closed my eyes, trying to endure the pain. Lily nestled close to me, a small comfort in the midst of turmoil. In that moment, a determination grew inside me. David's abandonment during my crisis wouldn't be forgotten. It was a deep hurt, a betrayal that marked a turning point. As I waited for Michael, one thing became clear: things would change. In the hospital bed later, surrounded by sterile walls and beeping machines, a sense of calm settled in. The surgery for my appendicitis went well, but David's emotional absence still stung. I had called my parents to care for Lily while I recovered, their voices filled with concern and unspoken questions about David's whereabouts. 3 days later, I was back home, the physical pain now a dull reminder of the recent ordeal. Lily greeted me eagerly, her face lighting up at my return. Mommy, you're back. Are you all better now? Her innocent question warmed my heart. I'm getting there, sweetie, I replied, hugging her tightly, grateful for her presence. The peace of our reunion was shattered the next day by the slam of the front door. David and his sister Rachel burst in, their voices filled with frustration. Why didn't you pick us up yesterday? We had to spend extra on a taxi and train fares. David's accusatory voice rang out as he entered the living room. I felt a surge of anger at his boldness. Welcome back. Must have been quite a journey, I said coldly, locking eyes with him. David halted, taken aback by my icy reception. Even Rachel seemed surprised by the tension. What's with the attitude, Evelyn? David demanded. I couldn't hold back anymore. While you were enjoying your trip, I was in a hospital, I said, my voice steady but simmering with anger. And you, Rachel, always demanding David's time without considering his family. Rachel flushed and David appeared bewildered. What are you talking about? You were fine, right? He replied, sounding dismissive. It's not just about being okay, David. It's about being there when your family needs you. I shot back, my frustration boiling over. Before David could respond, the living room door swung open, revealing Michael, our parents, and David's parents. 14 eyes, filled with varying degrees of anger and disappointment, fixed on David and Rachel. Why is everyone here? David's voice faltered, his confidence waning under their collective glare. Taking a deep breath, I channeled my pain and betrayal into words. David, you left Lily and me alone when we needed you the most. I had to go to the hospital, and you weren't there. I've told everything to our families. David seemed to shrink under the weight of my words, his usual bravado absent. His eyes darted around, searching for support but finding none. It's not just about this one incident, David. It's about all the times you've prioritized Rachel over your own family, my brother Michael added, his disappointment evident in his voice. Rachel, typically confident, appeared uneasy, shifting her gaze between the floor and the upset faces around her. David attempted to defend himself, offering excuses and justifications. The confrontation grew heated, tension thick in the air. But for me, it marked a turning point. I realized I couldn't continue living in the shadow of David's neglect. It was time for change, time to assert myself and protect Lily. The meeting concluded without resolution, but the message was clear. I had the support of both our families, and David's careless facade had been shattered. As they departed, David's parents glanced at me with sympathy, silently acknowledging their son's shortcomings. That night, as I lay in bed, the events of the day replayed in my mind. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, disappointment, but also a newfound strength. David had revealed his true self, and I knew it was time for me to take charge of my life. The days following the confrontation were tense with unspoken words. David tried to act as if nothing had changed, but the atmosphere between us was heavy. I spent that time reflecting, realizing the depth of my discontent and the necessity for change. The decision I reached wasn't easy, but it felt crucial, like a breath of fresh air after being stifled for so long. One evening, while David casually flipped through TV channels on the couch, I approached him with a folder in hand. My heart raced, but my determination held firm. David, we need to talk, I said, my voice steady. He glanced up, a hint of annoyance crossing his face. What now, Evelyn? I took a deep breath and handed him the folder. I want a divorce. David stared at me, disbelief and mockery flashing across his expression. Divorce? That's absurd, Evelyn. You're blowing things out of proportion. I shook my head, feeling a surge of empowerment. It's not an exaggeration. I've thought long and hard about this. You've consistently prioritized Rachel over me and Lily. I can't continue like this. David sneered. You think you can manage alone? Don't be naive, Evelyn. His words were meant to hurt, but I stood firm. I'm not naive, David. I understand what this means, but I'd rather face uncertainty than continue feeling invisible in my own marriage. He laughed, a cold, bitter sound. Good luck, Evelyn. You'll regret this once you realize how tough it is out there. I felt my anger rise, but I kept my composure. I won't. This is my decision, and I'm sticking to it. For a moment, David seemed like he might argue further, but then he shrugged, a smug smirk on his face. Fine, have it your way. But remember, I warned you. As he turned back to the TV, dismissing me once again, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. There was fear, certainly, but also a powerful sense of liberation. I was finally taking charge of my life, stepping out of the shadows. The next day, I started the legal process for divorce. It was overwhelming with all the paperwork and legal steps, but I was determined. My parents and Michael were supportive, offering help and encouragement. During this time, David's true nature became clearer. He was dismissive and uncooperative, trying to intimidate me into giving up. But I stood my ground, strengthened by my family's support and my growing sense of strength. As time went on, David's facade began to crack. The charming, confident man I married revealed himself to be selfish and manipulative, his true self exposed. The divorce proceedings were challenging, but I faced them bravely, each forward step a testament to my newfound determination. I was no longer the woman who lay on the kitchen floor, ignored and in pain. I was reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my happiness. The divorce process was exhausting, marked by David's constant attempts to undermine and demean me. In our meetings, he would sneer and make hurtful remarks about my parenting and my future without him. But instead of letting his words defeat me, they fueled my determination to break free from his toxic influence. Enjoy your struggles, Evelyn, David taunted in one of our final meetings. You'll soon see how good you had it with me. His arrogance infuriated me, but I remained composed. I'd rather face challenges every day than spend another moment with someone who has so little regard for his family, I replied firmly. David's smug demeanor briefly faltered, replaced by a flicker of anger. He quickly masked it with a scoff, but I could sense my words had struck a nerve. The day the divorce was finalized brought a strange mix of relief and nervousness. I was finally free from David, yet the road ahead seemed daunting. However, as I walked out of the courthouse, a wave of liberation washed over me. In the weeks following our divorce, David's life began to unravel. His neglectful behavior and our separation became the gossip of his workplace. Colleagues who had once admired him now looked at him with pity and disdain. His charming facade had crumbled, exposing the pettiness and selfishness beneath. News of our divorce spread throughout our community, largely due to my cousin, who was well connected in our neighborhood. David, who had always cared deeply about his image and reputation, found himself the subject of hushed conversations and judgmental stares. Rachel also faced criticism. Her role in our marital problems was now public knowledge, and friends and neighbors began to regard her with suspicion and disapproval. The bond she had with David, once unbreakable in her eyes, now seemed strained and uneasy. One evening, while picking up Lily from school, I overheard a heated argument between David and Rachel outside their house. Their voices dripped with blame and resentment. "It's your fault we're in this mess, Rachel," David yelled, his frustration palpable. "How dare you blame me? You're the one who couldn't hold your family together." Rachel shot back, her voice filled with anger. Their argument was a stark contrast to the united front they once presented. The discord sowed by their actions had finally come to fruition, and now they were facing the consequences. As I walked away with Lily, I felt a sense of vindication. David and Rachel were now grappling with the results of their selfish choices. It was a tough lesson, but one they had brought upon themselves. That night, as Lily slept peacefully in her room, I sat by the window reflecting on the past few months. The journey had been challenging, but it had brought me to a place of strength and self-respect. I had fought for my dignity and for Lily's future. Although the future was uncertain, I felt prepared to confront it with newfound confidence. In the aftermath of the divorce, life settled into a new rhythm, one that was quieter yet more fulfilling. The weight of my unhappy marriage had lifted, replaced by a newfound sense of independence. I began rebuilding my life step by step, with Lily by my side. My first priority was finding a job. The gap in my resume from years spent focusing on motherhood was a concern, but I was determined. After several interviews, I secured a position at a small accounting firm. The firm, led by a supportive woman who valued working mothers, offered a flexible and understanding environment. It was an ideal fit for me. Lily embraced the changes with the resilience that only children possess. She started kindergarten, making new friends and eagerly diving into learning. Her laughter and lively conversations filled our home with happiness, a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere of the past. Yet despite these positive changes, reminders of my past with David lingered. One afternoon, while dropping Lily off at school, I overheard a group of parents whispering, "That's her, Evelyn. Her husband left her because he couldn't stand being around her anymore," one of them said. Their words stung, but I held my head high. The gossip and judgment were small prices to pay for the freedom and peace I now had. Meanwhile, David's life continued to unravel. His pride took a significant hit, and his once flawless reputation was now tarnished. I heard from mutual acquaintances that he had moved back in with his parents, a fact he tried to conceal but eventually became known. Rachel's situation wasn't any better. Her interference in our marriage had isolated her from many friends. The once close siblings were now barely on speaking terms, their relationship strained by blame and regret. As for me, I found solace in the unwavering support of my family. My brother Michael had moved closer to us, his presence a constant source of comfort. My parents showered Lily with love, their affection soothing the wounds of the past. One day, while savoring coffee in my kitchen, I reflected on the journey I had endured, the pain, the struggle, and ultimately, the liberation. It had all brought me to this moment of peace. I hadn't just survived. I had emerged stronger and more self-assured. The doorbell interrupted my thoughts. Opening it, I found David standing there, wearing a look of defeat. "Evelyn, I'm sorry. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone," he said, his apology, though belated, validating my decision. "Thank you, David," I replied gently, "but it's too late. I've moved on." As I closed the door on David and the life we once shared, a sense of closure washed over me. That chapter of my life had ended, and a new one was beginning. In this new chapter, I was the author of my own story, free to shape my future as I saw fit. Lily's voice called out from the living room, and a smile spread across my face. I walked towards her, eager to embrace the life that lay ahead, a life brimming with possibilities and hope. "Did you really think you could just move your parents into our home without asking me, Ryan?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. Ryan, my husband of 6 years, looked up from his laptop with a smirk I had grown to hate. "Oh, Amelia, don't be so dramatic. It's just for a while. Besides, it's not like you have a say in this." His words felt like a slap in the face. The house, a lovely 2-story in a quiet suburb, wasn't just any house. It was the home my grandparents had left me, the place where I wanted to raise our son Lucas, away from the negativity of Ryan's family. "You do remember that this house is in my name, right?" I shot back, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. Ryan's smug look faded, replaced by a hint of uncertainty. Our 2-year-old son Lucas wandered into the room, oblivious to the tension. I forced a smile for him. As he reached up to me with his chubby hands, I picked him up and kissed his forehead, trying to calm down. "I'm not okay with this, Ryan. Your parents have never respected me or our space. Why now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Ryan shrugged, his indifference making me even more frustrated. "Their family, Amelia. You wouldn't understand." Family. The word echoed in my mind mockingly. My own family, who ran a small but beloved coffee shop in town, had always been my safe haven. They were nothing like Ryan's controlling, overbearing parents. The doorbell rang, interrupting our standoff. Through the peephole, I saw them, Ryan's parents, suitcases in tow, ready to invade our life. My heart sank. Fine, Ryan, let them in. But this isn't over, I said angrily, handing Lucas to him before opening the door. Amelia, darling, cooed Ryan's mother as she swept past me without a second glance. His father followed, a stern man who'd barely acknowledged me since our wedding day. As they made themselves comfortable in my living room, I felt a familiar sense of intrusion. This was just the beginning, I realized. But as I watched them, something inside me changed. I was done being the compliant daughter-in-law, bending to their whims. I retreated to the kitchen, my mind racing. This was my home, my sanctuary, and I was ready to fight for it. The following days became a blur of unwanted changes. Ryan's mother, Elaine, had a knack for making herself overly present, which felt suffocating. She rearranged my kitchen, criticized my parenting, and acted as if our home belonged to her. Lucas shouldn't be eating that, Amelia. It's not healthy, Elaine scolded one morning as I prepared Lucas's breakfast. I held back a sharp reply, feeling her judgment like a slap. He's fine, Elaine. It's just cereal. She sighed, shaking her head. In our house, we believe in a proper diet. You really should learn. Her remarks felt like tiny jabs, wearing down my patience. Ryan, as usual, was no help, lost in his work and unaware of the growing tension. One evening, as I was putting Lucas to bed, Elaine barged into his room. He's still not sleeping through the night. You must be doing something wrong. Her words felt like a slap, making me doubt my abilities as a mother. I'm doing my best, I snapped back, unable to hide my frustration. Elaine's eyes narrowed. Clearly, your best isn't good enough. Maybe if you had a real job and some structure in your life. Anger surged through me. This is my house, Elaine. You're a guest here, remember that. Her laugh was cold. Oh dear, Ryan never mentioned how delusional you are. This is his house too, and as his mother, I have every right to be here. The next day, I reached my limit. I found Elaine in Lucas's room, going through his drawers. What do you think you're doing? I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. I'm just organizing. This room is a mess, she replied, not even bothering to look at me. That's it. I want you out of my house now, I exclaimed, feeling a mix of fury and desperation. Elaine turned to face me, her expression one of mock surprise. Your house? Oh, sweetie, you're just the wife. This is Ryan's house too, and he wants us here. I stormed out of the room, my mind swirling with thoughts, Ryan's betrayal, Elaine's intrusion, and how they ignored my feelings. It was too much. I was tired of being pushed around, tired of my home being invaded by people who didn't respect me. That night, as I lay in bed, a plan started forming in my mind. I was going to take back control of my life, my home, and my son's future. Ryan and his parents had crossed a line, and it was time for them to realize I wouldn't be their doormat anymore. The fight was just beginning, and I was ready. A few days later, Ryan dropped a bombshell during an already tense dinner. My parents need to stay with us longer. Their house is undergoing renovations, he said casually, as if it were no big deal. I felt my anger rise. Longer? Ryan, we never talked about them staying here in the first place. He shrugged, avoiding my eyes. It's just for a few more weeks. What's the problem? The problem? Your mother treats me like I don't belong in my own home. I snapped, frustration boiling over. Elaine, overhearing us, chimed in with her usual condescending tone. Amelia, you're overreacting. We're family. You should be more understanding. That night, sleep escaped me. Their words kept replaying in my mind, fueling a growing determination. I wasn't going to let them control me anymore. It was time to take a stand. The next morning, I called my brother Alex, who had always been there for me. They're taking over my life, Alex. I can't handle it anymore, I confessed, holding back tears. Alex's voice was strong and supportive. Amelia, you have to stand up for yourself. Don't let them push you around. It's your house, your rules. His words gave me the courage I needed. I decided to talk to Ryan, but this time, I would be prepared. I gathered evidence of Elaine's bossy behavior, the rearranged kitchen, the disrupted routines, her constant rude comments. The day of confrontation came. I waited until Elaine and Ryan were in the living room. We need to talk. Now, I declared, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. Ryan looked up, taken aback by my tone. What's going on, Amelia? It's about your parents, Ryan. Their constant interference, their disrespect for my boundaries. It stops today, I declared, holding up my list of complaints. Elaine scoffed. This is ridiculous. We're just trying to be helpful. Helpful? By undermining me all the time, by treating me like I don't matter in my own home. I shot back, my frustration boiling over. Ryan squirmed. Amelia, they're my parents. We can't just ask them to leave. No, Ryan. They're guests in my home, and they've stayed too long. Either they go, or I do with Lucas, I stated firmly, my determination clear. The room fell silent, my words hanging in the air. I saw Ryan's realization, but it was Elaine who spoke first. You wouldn't dare, she spat, her mask slipping. Try me. I won't regret standing up for myself, I retorted, my voice filled with determination. That night, Ryan's parents packed their bags. As they left, Elaine shot me a hateful look. You'll regret this, Amelia, she warned. But as the door closed behind them, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was the first step in taking back control of my life, and I was prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. The days after Elaine and her husband left were strangely quiet. Ryan's attitude towards me became cold and distant, our interactions minimal and strained. Yet, I found comfort in the peace of my home and the joyful laughter of Lucas. One evening, as Lucas played with his toys, Ryan announced, I have to go on a business trip. I'll be gone for a few weeks. His tone was indifferent, as if our troubled relationship had taken a backseat to his work. Fine, I replied sharply, barely able to hide my relief at the thought of his absence. After Ryan left, the atmosphere in the house shifted, feeling liberating. I started undoing the changes Elaine had made, each adjustment feeling like a small victory. But the real turning point came when I stumbled upon a series of emails on Ryan's laptop, left carelessly open. They revealed an affair, a betrayal that cut deeper than any of his mother's snide remarks. Anger, hurt, and a sense of betrayal swirled inside me. I knew it was time for Ryan to face the consequences. I began planning my next moves meticulously, each step aimed at making Ryan and his family answer for their deceit and manipulation. First, I secured my financial and legal position. I contacted a lawyer, explained my situation, and started the divorce proceedings. Then I focused on the house, a symbol of my grandparents' legacy and my independence. I reached out to a real estate agent. I want to sell the house quickly and quietly, I told her. She was surprised but could sense the urgency in my voice. Are you sure about this, Amelia? Selling the house is a big step, she warned. I've never been more certain, I replied, fueled by a mix of betrayal and newfound determination. The house went on the market and offers came in quickly. The idea of Ryan returning to find his control gone brought a bittersweet satisfaction. In the midst of all this, I leaned on my family for support. My parents were shocked by Ryan's actions and stood by me and Lucas. We're here for you, no matter what, my father assured me. Watching Lucas play, unaffected by the chaos, I silently promised to shield his happiness. Ryan's return was inevitable. But I was no longer the same person he left. Armed with truth and a plan, I was ready to confront him and take back my life. The day Ryan returned was heavy with tension. I had played out this moment in my head countless times, imagining every possible scenario. Yet my heart raced as I heard his key turn in the lock. Amelia, I'm back, Ryan called out, his voice filling the now unfamiliar space. I stepped out from the kitchen, my stance firm. Welcome home, Ryan. We need to talk. He glanced around, noticing the changes I'd made. What's going on? The house looks different. I didn't falter. I sold the house, Ryan. It's no longer ours. Disbelief washed over his face. You did what? You can't just sell our house without telling me. It's my house, Ryan. And after what I found out, I don't think you get a say anymore. I said, my voice steady but tinged with simmering anger. He scoffed, trying to regain control. What are you talking about? The affair, Ryan. I know everything, I revealed, watching as his facade crumbled. His attempt to deny it was feeble and short-lived. Amelia, it's not what you think. I think it's exactly what it looks like. You betrayed me, our family, I retorted, the hurt clear in my voice. Ryan's expression shifted from shock to anger. You're overreacting. We can fix this. There's no we anymore, Ryan. I filed for divorce, I declared, handing him the papers. The ensuing conversation was a blur of accusations and denials. but I stood my ground. The man I married was gone, replaced by a stranger driven by selfish desires. As he stormed out, vowing to contest the divorce, I felt a mix of freedom and apprehension. I had taken the first step toward a new life, but the fight was far from over. In the following weeks, our situation became public. Ryan's once imposing parents were now entangled in their son's mess. Their attempts to reach out were met with silence. I had cut ties with them, focusing solely on Lucas and finalizing the divorce. The day of the court hearing arrived. Ryan looked defeated, the consequences of his actions finally sinking in. As the judge granted the divorce and custody of Lucas to me, I felt a sense of justice. Ryan's plea for reconciliation after the hearing fell on deaf ears. "You made your choice, Ryan. Now you have to live with it," I said, turning away from him for the last time. News of our divorce and Ryan's affair spread, tarnishing his reputation and relationships. His once proud and judgmental parents found themselves shunned by those who had once respected them. Walking out of the courthouse holding Lucas's hand, I realized this wasn't just an end, but a new beginning, a chance for me and my son to start fresh, free from deceit and manipulation. The future was uncertain, but it was ours to shape. Life after the divorce felt like stepping out of a long, dark tunnel into the light. I had regained control not just of the house, now sold, but of my life. Lucas, unaware of the grown-up troubles, flourished in the love and stability I provided. My days were busy but fulfilling, focused on rebuilding our lives and running the coffee shop, my sanctuary. The shadow of Ryan and his parents lingered, casting a pall over my life. One day, as I was closing the shop, Ryan appeared, looking disheveled and desperate, a stark contrast to the composed man I had once known. "Amelia, please, I need to talk to you," he pleaded, his eyes searching mine for a glimmer of the compassion we once shared. I hesitated, torn by conflicting emotions. "What do you want, Ryan?" "It's about the alimony and child support," he began, his voice filled with embarrassment. "I can't afford it. I lost my job because of the scandal. And my parents? They're struggling too." His words hit me like a cold shock. "That's not my problem, Ryan. You made your choices and now you have to face the consequences." "But Amelia, I have nothing left. Please, for old time's sake," he begged, his voice breaking with despair. I felt a pang of pity, but it was quickly overtaken by the memory of his betrayal. Old time's sake. Those times are gone, Ryan. You should have thought about the consequences before you cheated and lied. I turned to leave, but his next words stopped me in my tracks. "I'm sorry, Amelia. Truly, I am. I was a fool and I ruined everything. Please help me." For a moment, I glimpsed the man I once loved, vulnerable and regretful. But the pain he had caused was too deep, the betrayal too raw. "I'm sorry, Ryan, but I can't help you. You need to figure this out on your own," I said firmly, closing the chapter of our shared past for good. As I walked away, leaving Ryan standing alone, I felt a sense of closure. The journey had been painful, filled with betrayal and heartache, but it had led me to a place of strength and independence. Life moved on. Lucas grew, his laughter and curiosity bringing joy to our home. The coffee shop thrived, becoming a place of warmth and community. And as for me, I found contentment in simple pleasures. The aroma of fresh coffee, the sound of Lucas's giggles, and the support of loved ones. Ryan and his parents became distant memories, their legacy a reminder of the consequences of betrayal. My journey taught me resilience and the importance of standing up for oneself. As I locked the shop that evening, I looked up at the sky, its hues signaling the end of another day. I smiled, holding Lucas's hand tightly. Our future was uncertain, but it was bright. We were moving forward, step by step, into a new chapter of our lives. Receiving an allowance without having to do household chores might sound ideal at first, but living with my mother-in-law, Doris, adds complexities to what could be an easy arrangement. As a 34-year-old web designer, I've adjusted to the ups and downs of freelancing, but Doris's constant sarcasm often dims the perks of this lifestyle. My husband, Bobby, and I face various challenges living with her, mostly because of our differing views on work and home responsibilities. After getting married, I transitioned from a corporate job to freelancing, a change that was well received by my former employer and myself. It's allowed me to maintain a steady stream of projects with familiar clients, freed me from daily commutes, and given me more time to focus on our home. Despite the benefits and Bobby's supportive attitude, Doris clings to her traditional beliefs about marriage and the role of a wife. In her mind, a wife should primarily be a homemaker, and she regularly makes her views known, dismissing the idea of modern shared responsibilities between spouses. To Doris, my freelance work seems insignificant, and she believes it doesn't contribute meaningfully to the household finances. I try my best to balance my web design projects with household chores when I have free time. But no matter what I do, Doris's opinions remain unchanged. Her dissatisfaction seems to stem from the contrast between my contemporary approach to work-life balance and her more traditional expectations. She likely views me as an outsider disrupting her family dynamic, especially since she's grown more reliant on Bobby since his father passed away 4 years ago. We live in the home Bobby's father purchased, which Doris now owns outright, thanks to life insurance settling the mortgage. This house serves as the backdrop for our intergenerational tensions, and navigating daily life here means managing conflicting perspectives while trying to respect both the old and new ways of family life. Despite the occasional tensions, the house, with its thoughtful design, comfortably accommodates our small family and provides me with the perfect workspace. It also doubles as a popular gathering spot for Doris's friends, many of whom have lived in the neighborhood for over 25 years. When they visit, the atmosphere shifts, and I often find myself playing the role of a gracious hostess, serving coffee and sweets as the group chats. Inevitably, their conversations drift toward sharing grievances about their daughters-in-law, a recurring topic of discussion. I sometimes find myself chuckling as Doris and her friends swap stories about their daughters-in-law. One tale that always gets a reaction is about a daughter-in-law who frequently flees to her parents' home after minor disagreements, sometimes staying away for nearly half the year. They label her as financially reckless, shaking their heads as they recount how her behavior has left their sons bewildered and even brought debt collectors to their doors. These discussions, which often take place near my workspace, sometimes turn into a sort of informal competition, each woman trying to outdo the others with stories of their troublesome daughters-in-law. Praises for daughters-in-law are rare in these sessions. However, on the rare occasion that one is commended for efficiently managing the household while holding down a job, Doris's reaction is always the same: sour. She dismisses such efforts with a casual wave of her hand, reducing my own freelance work to nothing more than a side gig. Even as the room fills with laughter, the blend of humor and critique reveals a lot about the generational divide in values and expectations surrounding family roles. These moments make it clear just how challenging it can be to reconcile traditional views with modern family dynamics. Amid the lively discussions and laughter that echo through our living room when Doris hosts her friends, my job often becomes the subject of scrutiny. Doris loudly questions the value of my work, openly wondering how much I actually make. This shift in the conversation inevitably leads to a discussion of the spending habits of daughters-in-law, with sharp contrasts drawn between their spending and the old-fashioned belief that the husband's income should be the family's primary support. The room always bursts into laughter, finding humor in the seemingly outdated nature of such expectations, even as these beliefs still linger in the background. I often feel overwhelmed by the repetitive stories and outdated views expressed during Doris's gatherings. To cope, I slip on my headphones and try to drown out the constant undercurrent of belittlement aimed at modern daughters-in-law, myself included. One evening at a family dinner, when Bobby suggested buying a new car, Doris immediately questioned why he needed my approval for such a decision. Despite Bobby's efforts to explain that we make major decisions together as a family, Doris insisted that since he had the driver's license, he should choose whatever car he wanted without my input. Caught in this tug of war, I tactfully deferred the decision back to him, a moment that perfectly encapsulated the complex dynamics at play in our household. Bobby, raised to value mutual decision-making, consistently seeks both my and his mother's input on major choices. Meanwhile, Doris, shaped by her late husband's more patriarchal approach, clings to the belief that such independence is normal. Every time Bobby asks for my opinion, it irritates her, leading to accusations that I'm too controlling. This recurring theme in our interactions reveals the tension between traditional and contemporary values in our family life, highlighting the difficulty of balancing respect for the past with the realities of a modern partnership. Struggling to respond to Doris's criticisms, I've come to recognize that I do tend to express my concerns rather than make decisions unilaterally. But my dismay grew when, during a recent argument, Bobby sided with his mother, blaming my vocal nature for his habit of consulting me before making any decisions. Several months into our marriage, it became clear that he rarely defended me in front of his mother. Even in private, his apologies and assurances that he prioritized our relationship started to feel hollow. This realization deepened with the car buying incident, which casts a long shadow over our relationship. Bobby, who had initially seemed considerate, ultimately failed to support me in front of his mother, raising serious doubts about our future together. I began wishing he wouldn't mistake his indecisiveness for kindness and hoped Doris would be more direct in her communication. A month later, Bobby's new car finally arrived. He and Doris were thrilled, inviting me for a celebratory drive. But the mood quickly shifted when the cost of the car was revealed, a staggering $300,000. This impulsive purchase, made without any real discussion, felt like the final straw in an already strained dynamic. I confronted my husband about the financial implications of such an extravagant purchase, but he brushed me off with dismissive responses, casually suggesting that we could just take out a loan. Doris immediately jumped to his defense, scolding me for questioning the expense. According to her, I had given Bobby the freedom to make his own choice, so why was I complaining now? Frustrated, I asked how we could possibly afford such a luxury, but Doris cut me off sharply. It's not like you pay for anything, so you have no right to complain. Feeling utterly unheard and marginalized in decisions that directly affected our shared life, I was left grappling with a sense of isolation in my own home. It became clear that my input was undervalued and that financial decisions were being made with little regard for joint consultation or responsibility. As I tried to assert my contributions to the household through my freelance work, Doris's reaction was unusually harsh. She scoffed at my efforts, dismissing my income as a little side job that couldn't compare to Bobby's substantial salary of over $130,000 a year. Her disdain was palpable, and just as I was about to defend myself, I noticed my husband had silently withdrawn from the confrontation, leaving me alone to face his mother's harsh words. After enduring this kind of treatment for too long, I finally reached my breaking point when Doris snapped, "A daughter-in-law, like you should just get out." Her words hit me like a slap in the face, not just an insult but a total dismissal of everything I had tolerated. Angered and deeply disappointed by Bobby's indifference, I turned to him and blamed him for the escalating conflict, knowing it stemmed from his chronic inability to stand up for me. Fed up, I said firmly, "Understood. Then I will leave." I walked to my workspace, gathered my computer and essentials, and prepared to leave. As I crossed the threshold, I informed Doris that I would return later to collect the rest of my belongings. Her angry gaze followed me, and just as I stepped out the door, she shouted after me, "When you step into this house again, it will be to sign the divorce papers." Her abrasive words echoed behind me, something I had never expected to hear, and they stunned me into silence. I sought refuge at my parents' house, shaken and unsure of what to do next. The moment my mother saw me, she knew something was wrong. She asked gently, "What happened?" Struggling to articulate the full weight of the events, I stood there, lost for words, feeling the heaviness of everything I had just walked away from. I shared my regrets with my parents, expressing how much my husband had changed from the man who once cherished me deeply. Talking through the situation brought some relief, and with no children complicating matters, my mother gently suggested I consider divorce sooner rather than later, especially since I was financially independent. Over the weekend, with my father's support, I began taking the necessary steps toward a new beginning, contemplating a future that, though uncertain, promised peace and self-respect. I returned to collect my belongings from the house I had shared with my husband and his mother. Both of them seemed to avoid any final confrontation. Standing outside my husband's room, I spoke softly, "You took care of me for a long time. Can you sign the divorce papers?" I slipped the documents under the door, and soon after, I heard his indifferent reply, "I've signed them. We're done here." Retrieving the signed papers felt like a hollow victory, marking the end of our marriage. I left without a word to my mother-in-law, carrying the deep sadness after 3 years in that house, a place with only a handful of happy memories. I went straight to the city office to submit the divorce papers, hoping the formal separation would help bring closure to this chapter of my life. My plan was to temporarily move back to my parents' home and continue working remotely as I started to rebuild my life independently. My mother suggested I stay with them for a while, reassuring me that it would be less worrying than living alone. My father shared similar concerns, cautioning that Bobby and his mother might unpredictably show up at my door. Although I initially thought that scenario was unlikely, living at my parents' home brought unexpected comfort. Thankfully, my job's flexibility allowed me to work remotely, and I extended my stay with ease. 3 months passed, and as Bobby and his mother slowly faded into distant memories, an unknown number suddenly appeared on my phone. Initially hesitant, I considered it might be a mistake or an unwelcome reminder of my past. After several persistent calls, I finally answered, only to hear my ex-husband's frantic voice on the other end. "Why didn't you answer the phone earlier?" he asked, sounding confused and somewhat panicked. Prepared to end the conversation quickly, I calmly replied, "There's no reason for us to communicate anymore," making it clear that I had moved on and had no interest in reopening old wounds. I was about to hang up, but his next question caught me off guard. "Wait a minute, why isn't my smartphone working?" he inquired. With little interest, I suggested he contact the phone company, but then a thought struck me. I asked if he had been making regular deposits into the joint bank account we used to share. Previously, we both contributed to this account, my steady salary along with his more variable income from selling health products, which was often insufficient due to its performance-based nature. Normally, I topped up the account at the end of each month, but for the last 4 months, only his contributions had been made. It dawned on me that I had left in the middle of the month, and the payments for the new car loan might have already begun. My ex-husband fell silent as the realization hit him. Calmly, I stated, "I've been managing our household expenses with my income until now. From this point forward, you'll need to take care of your own living expenses." Internally, I wanted to tell him, "You reap what you sow," but I held back and quietly ended the call. Reflecting on the situation, I realized that my ex-husband had never fully disclosed his actual earnings to his mother. She seemed unaware that our household had been primarily supported by my salary after we got married. Perhaps he was too embarrassed to admit that his wife was the main earner. It was clear that basic utilities like electricity and water shouldn't be disrupted so easily, which pointed to a deeper issue of financial mismanagement and lack of transparency. One of the many problems that had plagued our relationship. The fact that his mobile service was the first luxury to go was telling. One holiday morning, the house intercom buzzed insistently, signaling an issue at the door. My father responded sternly to the visitor, "We don't want to be involved with you anymore. Please leave." Sensing the gravity of the situation, I hurried to the entrance alongside my mother. Through the intercom, we heard the familiar voice of my former mother-in-law, pleading for a moment to talk. As I faced her just as my father had predicted, anger was evident on her face. She immediately launched into accusations, blaming me for not making the usual monthly deposits, which she claimed had led to their utilities being cut off. We were all taken aback, unsure of what she meant. My ex-husband attempted to step in, saying, "Mom, stop it. Doris is no longer involved with us." But his mother brushed him aside, continuing her tirade. "Bobby earns $7,500 a month. How could this happen?" she exclaimed. Her fury revealed the depth of their financial disarray, and in that moment, it became clear just how much they had relied on me, both emotionally and financially. I responded quietly, correcting her. The $7,500 was my income, not Bobby's. Shocked by this revelation, she turned to my ex-husband, who reluctantly admitted that his actual take-home pay was far less. My former mother-in-law looked at me in astonishment, unable to comprehend the truth. I explained that my income came from a steady job, not just an allowance. She then turned to Bobby and asked again about his earnings. He sheepishly confirmed what I had said, his own contributions amounting to about $1,500 monthly. After a moment of stunned silence, she made an astonishing proposal. "Doris, how about coming back?" It seemed ludicrous that she would ask me to return after insisting I leave in the first place. I refused firmly, making it clear there was no going back to the way things were. "We're already divorced," I stated bluntly, "and this is no longer my concern." Despite my clear refusal, she persisted, insisting that everything could be resolved if I just reconciled with Bobby. My father, growing increasingly impatient, spoke in a forceful tone. "Leave now," he demanded, "or I'll call the police." They left in a hurry, almost stumbling as they exited, my father sternly warning them never to set foot in our home again. Reflecting on the encounter, my mother was visibly furious, but my father's indignation was even more pronounced. I felt a deep sense of relief that we had finally severed ties with such unreasonable people. As time went on, I learned through a mutual acquaintance of Bobby's that his hardships had only deepened. He was forced to give up his parents' house and the land, moving into a modest apartment with his mother. The new car, which was rarely used, had been sold off to settle the remaining loan. Even after clearing his debts, Bobby continued down a path of financial irresponsibility, squandering what little he had left on gambling. Eventually, his whereabouts became unknown. Meanwhile, my former mother-in-law was diagnosed with dementia and now resides in a nursing home. On a brighter note, my career is thriving, and I am living independently. Recently, I started dating a colleague who is well aware of my past marriage. Unlike Bobby, he is dedicated to his job, financially responsible, and doesn't depend on his spouse for income or engage in reckless spending. While we haven't explicitly discussed marriage, I feel confident about our future together, sensing a genuine potential in our relationship that I never experienced before.
If the ownership of this house isn't transferred to me, I'm contemplating a divorce. I was taken aback when my husband suddenly dropped this bombshell. This house holds precious memories of our family, and I can't bear to part with it. Despite my emotional attachment, my husband is threatening me, toying with my feelings. Distraught, I reached out to my father for help. I am Emily, a 30-year-old full-time housewife, dedicating my days to supporting and managing our household. I married John 2 years ago, and since quitting my job after marriage, my husband has been the breadwinner. However, our peaceful life took a turn for the worse after my father-in-law's passing, leading to my mother-in-law moving into our apartment. Surprisingly, I was informed about my mother-in-law's move the day before she arrived. Nonchalantly, my husband announced her impending arrival as if it were the most natural thing. It caught me off guard, and I questioned the suddenness of it. I forgot to mention earlier that my mother would also be coming to live with us from tomorrow. As soon as my husband came home, he casually mentioned her arrival, asking me to prepare and clean up. I was bewildered by the news. I thought she was coming over for a visit, but my husband clarified that she was moving in. The decision was made without any prior discussion with me, and the very next day, my mother-in-law arrived with numerous luggages. "It's been a while. I'm glad you look well, Mary. Please come in," I greeted her. However, she seemed displeased for some reason. As she entered, she questioned why I didn't come to pick her up, emphasizing that it's common sense to meet at the station, especially when you know your mother-in-law is arriving. While carrying the hefty luggages, "I didn't know what time you'd arrive. In that case, shouldn't you have contacted me? You're so thoughtless." I apologize. This is why they say some daughter-in-laws are useless and inconsiderate. Grumbling, the mother-in-law settled heavily on the sofa. Despite being a guest in our home, she acted as if she owned the place. I couldn't believe it. From that day on, her snide comments became even more intense. As soon as my husband left for work, the barrage began. "Emily, why are you sitting there? Do the dishes. You should have finished the laundry in the morning. That's common knowledge." "I'm sorry, I'll do the laundry once the dishes are done." You have the wrong priorities. In my house, it's a rule to do laundry immediately after breakfast. But that rule is just to do as you're told. Haven't your parents taught you not to make excuses? I had my own daily routine, and it seemed that Mary couldn't understand that I wasn't refusing to do the work. Even if I did things her way, she would still find fault and complain every day. The daytime hours alone with her were especially challenging. One day, I had an epiphany on how to end this living hell with my mother-in-law. The plan was to move to the house I inherited from my father and live in a separate home from her. My father retired early a few months ago, and my parents started a new life in the countryside. They then passed on their house to me. Fortunately, that house isn't too far from our current apartment, and we were planning to move eventually. Living with my mother-in-law had reached my limits, so I decided to talk to my husband about moving sooner. John, can we talk for a moment? What's up? Anything happened? Remember the house my father gave us? What do you think about moving there? Oh, that house. We did talk about moving there someday. Why the sudden decision? Well, I've been having some difficulties with your mother. She never mentioned anything, but I can't bear living with her anymore. That's why I'm seriously considering moving. Observing that the new place isn't too far, I suggested we move there, allowing my mother-in-law to stay in the current apartment. Surprisingly, my husband agreed to the move. After informing Mary, we decided to make the move a week later. Honestly, I anticipated some opposition from her, but she accepted our decision with a big smile. Goodbye, John and Emily. I'm so sorry for the sudden decision to move. Don't worry about it. It's wonderful that your father gave you the house. He's very sweet. Thank you. Please visit us sometime. Of course, it's not too far from here, and I hope you visit me regularly too. I will. After the conversation, I headed to our new home with my husband, feeling relieved that I wouldn't have to endure snide remarks anymore. I could now live freely at my own pace. Although I had initially feared Mary's opposition, consulting with John brought me peace. However, my peace did not last. Despite being able to keep my distance from my mother-in-law and reduce stress, my husband started coming home late. It wasn't just the late returns. There were days when he wouldn't come home at all. He defended his actions, saying he was worried about his mother, but it became too frequent. Without informing me, he went to her house, had dinner with her, and sometimes stayed overnight, disrupting my daily life. This can't go on, I thought one day. I sat him down for a talk. John, you've been coming home really late lately, and sometimes you don't even come home at all. Is that so? I'm just worried about my mother. That's not the point. At least let me know beforehand that you'll be late, so I'll know I don't have to prepare dinner. Since you're a housewife and always at home, you can eat the leftovers for lunch the next day, right? So you're saying I should just accept everything quietly because I'm a housewife? Are you saying we shouldn't talk about this? Isn't that the truth? Housewives just relax at home. What? What are you saying? Anyway, I'm worried about leaving my mother alone. Ellie will be coming back soon, and I need to discuss some things with her. Wait, Ellie is coming back. What does he need to discuss with her? Curious, I asked my husband. We're moving Ellie here to live with us. Live together? Yes, she kept saying she wanted a big house like the one she lived abroad. That's why I thought of letting her stay in this house. What? I don't understand. Suddenly informed of this, I couldn't think of anything. Is my sister-in-law going to live in this house? I had barely escaped from Mary's constant complaints, and now his sister, Ellie, was going to live in this house. I couldn't wrap my head around it. This was the house I inherited from my father. It felt unnatural. It's the only big house that would satisfy Ellie, my husband argued. The apartment where we used to live is now where my mother stays, and it's too small for 4 people. But I never intended to live with Ellie. I don't plan to live together either. I intend to give this house to Ellie, my husband declared. What? Why? Because we plan to move back with my mother. Ellie can use this house freely, he explained. I was taken aback by my husband's unreasonable proposal and felt like fainting. Despite my repeated insistence that I had no intention of living with my mother-in-law, my husband eventually became furious. Can't you be a little more considerate? You can live because of me, so just do as I say. Enough is enough of your jokes. This house is precious to me, inherited from my father. Why should I give it to Ellie? Such a wonderful house is wasted on you, isn't it? I've already told Ellie that I've got her a large house. It's too late to say otherwise now. I wasn't consulted in any of this decision. Either way, I can't accept it. You're always complaining. Enough. Calm down and think. I'll go back to my mother's for a while. My husband angrily slammed the door and left. Left alone in the room, tears streamed down my face. I couldn't understand why my husband decided everything on his own. It's unimaginable that he intends to give away the house I inherited from my father to my sister-in-law. Every day, my husband sent me messages asking if I had calmed down and to come back soon. Each time, I had to firmly tell him that I had no intention of agreeing. Then, one day, he said something shocking over the phone. "Hey, Emily, when will you come here and live with me? Stop nagging. I've said it so many times. I have no intention of living with Mary, moving there and giving this house to Ellie. I've already told Ellie. Stop being selfish. She might be coming back this week, so there's no time. Why should I give up my house for your family? I inherited this house from my father. Don't decide on your own. Who do you think you're talking to? Even my mother is furious. I'm at my wit's end. That's not my problem. You're ignoring my feelings," I responded. My husband let out a big sigh over the phone, clearly frustrated. Then he said something shocking. "If you can't listen to me, then let's divorce. Hand over the house to Ellie. Leave by tomorrow." At that moment, my love for my husband quickly faded. Threatening me with the word divorce was utterly despicable. I couldn't possibly forgive him for using divorce as a threat without considering someone's feelings. I couldn't allow these people to have their way. Burning with anger, my husband continued to speak with a triumphant and dominating tone. "Listen, if you don't leave by tomorrow, I'll really divorce you. Got it?" "Wait, are you serious?" "Of course I am. You don't have a choice. What will you do if you, a housewife, get divorced? You can't survive." "Enough, I get it." "Good. Hurry up and move over here. My mother is looking forward to disciplining you." He hung up the phone with a confident tone, thinking I would do as he said. After that call, I made up my mind and decided to seek help from my father for a plan. The next day, everything was ready for the move. I replied calmly when asked, "By the way, I'm curious about when Ellie will be back." "She'll be back tomorrow. Why are you so obsessed with Ellie?" "Between you and me, she seems to have made a lot from stock investments." "I see. So if you provide her with a house, maybe you can ask for financial help." "That's so like you. Anyway, you need to leave that house by today. It's inconvenient for all of us." "Don't worry. I've already moved." "What? What do you mean?" My husband seemed genuinely surprised. "I knew it. You don't want to divorce me, do you?" "Naturally. Without an income, you can't survive. But all of this is coming to an end. We're still married now, so that's why we're talking." "Wait, what? I can only think about divorce now." My husband was clearly shaken by my words. "You promised to move out of that house, right, and live with me. But you've already moved? What are you saying? Of course, I won't live in a house with a husband who decides everything on his own and a bullying mother-in-law. Why are you including me? You promised to move out for Ellie." "I said I've already moved, didn't I?" "I did as you said. Enough with the jokes. Where are you now?" My husband's tone was panicky, and he was clearly losing his cool. "Actually, I'm at my parents' house." "Why?" "I moved to my parents' rural home. I don't plan on returning to where you guys are." "You should have told me that sooner." My husband replied with a hint of relief in his voice. "If I could just give that house to Ellie, it doesn't matter where you live. It would require $3,300,000. $3,300,000. I put the house I inherited from my father up for sale. And if you truly want to give it to Ellie, buy it for $3,300 and then hand it over." "Are you joking?" "I'm serious. The house was still in my father's name, so I asked him to sell it. In reality, what I asked my father for was to sell the house. My father had always said, 'If something happens, contact me. You can live or sell this house as you like. I'll help you.' As a result of the valuation, a price of $3,300,000 was proposed, which I gladly agreed to and put the house on the market immediately." My husband probably never saw this coming. He spat out insults, consumed with anger. Why are you doing this without asking me? This is unforgivable. I'm not asking for, nor do I need your approval. We're getting divorced soon anyway. I don't care. Do you understand your position? You'll be the one in trouble if we divorce. Since you don't have an income, you're just a housewife. I'd rather struggle on my own than be with you forever. Listen, Ellie will be coming back soon. I told you I'm relying on Ellie's money, didn't I? So what? Like I said, if you want to let dear Ellie live in that house, just buy it for $3,300,000. That is if you can. What? That's impossible. If Ellie has made a lot of money from her investments, I don't see why she can't afford it. I don't know how much she made, but that's too much. She can never afford it. My husband was all excuses with no hint of an apology, maintaining his domineering attitude. I felt it was foolish to spend any more time on him and unleashed everything I wanted to say. I'm done with you and this ridiculous mess. Did you think threatening divorce would make me give up the house? If you thought being a housewife meant I'd do whatever you say, you're so wrong. Hey, let's calm down and talk. I am calm. Isn't it you who's panicking? I won't be controlled by you or your family anymore. Stay out of my life. Go to hell with your beloved mother, you mama's boy. I shouted loudly enough for the whole neighborhood to hear, then abruptly hung up the phone. Of course, I'd had enough of these insane calls from my husband, so I blocked his number. I immediately consulted my lawyer and decided to request a divorce. It took some time, but the divorce was finalized, recognizing my husband's fault. He and Mary still live in that apartment. As for Ellie, they couldn't provide the large house she wanted, and she was furious, claiming this wasn't the deal, and made a U-turn back overseas. My ex-husband's plan to seek financial assistance from his successful sister fell through, and now he seems to be struggling financially, having to pay me alimony and support his mother. As long as he continues to live with such a selfish mother, his life will never be prosperous. On the other hand, I've moved to the countryside and am enjoying peaceful days with my parents. I recently started a clerical job at a small company introduced by a neighbor. With that salary, I can live comfortably. I plan to live here for a while. I want to be by my parents' side as much as possible to repay the kindness they show me.
Megan, as usual, you're as inconsiderate as ever. This trip was something my son and I had been looking forward to for ages, and since you had no hand in planning it, you really have no business being here. My mother-in-law snapped the moment my husband stepped away from the table. We were on a vacation that I had organized at my husband's request, but her hostility made it clear I was an outsider. At that point, I figured leaving early was the best option. Whatever they talked about once I was gone was no longer my concern. I'm Megan, a working woman with the flexibility to do most of my job from home. This means I spend a lot of time in the house. And my husband, Frank, always seems to be focused on impressing others while acting like he's above it all. He loves throwing money around for show but somehow never contributes to our household bills. He hid this side of himself when we were dating, but it became painfully obvious once we started living together. His biggest supporter is, of course, his mother, who never misses a chance to praise him. I expected her to dote on him like many mothers do, but she turned out to be harsh and dismissive of everyone else's opinions, especially mine. From the start, she made it clear that I wasn't good enough for her son, and her snide comments never stopped. She seemed especially bothered by my financial independence and my ability to support myself. "You're still young. You should go work outside," she would often suggest, as if I weren't already working. No matter how many times I explained that I worked from home full-time, she refused to acknowledge it, dismissing my job as some part-time hobby. I'm sure she believes I just play games all day or neglect the housework. Frank knows full well what my work schedule looks like, but but that hasn't stopped his mother from seeing me as a lazy, irresponsible wife. What's worse is that he never stands up for me. When she criticizes me in front of him, he just sits there in silence. I've asked him countless times to set the record straight, but he always says it's our issue to work out. He refuses to get involved, leaving me to handle the constant attacks alone. Once, when I pressed him for support, he angrily tossed divorce papers at me. The hurt and frustration were overwhelming, and for the first time, I seriously considered leaving him. But as difficult as marriage had been, the thought of divorce felt even more terrifying. I've come to realize that my husband constantly prioritizes his mother over our relationship, which is beyond frustrating. Still, I know I need to find a way to handle her expectations and comments without making things worse. I didn't agree to a divorce, not because my feelings for him remained intact, but because it seemed more practical to stay. He seems convinced I'm still head over heels in love with him, which only boosts his arrogant attitude. It's the kind of arrogance that's charming in a child but utterly repellent in an adult. Over time, I've learned to tune out his conceit and brush off his behavior. Another reason I hesitated to push for divorce was our living situation. Thanks to my husband's job, we live far from his parents, so we only see them once or twice a year. I thought I could manage with such limited interaction. Also, since I work with international clients, American holidays don't play a huge role in my schedule, giving me some flexibility. As for my husband, even though he has the opportunity, he rarely takes extended time off, so it's not like we spend a lot of time together anyway. Between that and the infrequent visits to his parents, I believed I could navigate this rocky situation. Then, after his first day back at work, he came home bursting with excitement, proposing a spontaneous overseas trip. He explained that some of his colleagues had gone on a 7-day international holiday, and he felt left out. He was proud of his spur-of-the-moment idea, oblivious to how impractical it all seemed, which left me stunned by his naivety. I hadn't traveled anywhere that year, but I suggested we stick to a domestic trip since he didn't even have a passport yet. I've always been good with languages, having studied abroad and traveled widely before we got married. Aside from English, I'm fluent in Spanish and have a decent command of Chinese. When my mom got hooked on Korean dramas, I even picked up a bit of Korean, though I'm still shaky on it. But regardless of my language skills, getting passports and planning an international trip isn't as simple as my husband imagined. I suggested we plan for something abroad during a more convenient season, like the summer or winter holidays, but he was insistent. Despite having zero travel experience, he picked the destination, took time off without confirming it with his workplace, and expected me to handle all the details. When I voiced concerns about the logistics of such a trip, he brushed them aside with, "English is universal." He was convinced we wouldn't face any problems, as if everything would magically fall into place. Just when I thought we might manage, my husband dropped another bombshell. His plan included bringing his mother along, and he simply assumed I would handle everything. Managing 2 inexperienced travelers was already daunting enough, but his casual remark about showing some respect for your elders and earning brownie points as a devoted wife felt patronizing and overwhelming. It wasn't framed as a favor I might do for them, it was more like a duty he expected me to fulfill. Still, despite my growing frustration, I found myself quietly making the necessary arrangements just as he had directed. In his mind, he was doing me a favor by orchestrating this trip, and it felt impossible to argue without seeming ungrateful. So, as he wished, I got to work. I handled everything, from securing passports for my mother-in-law and husband to booking flights, hotels, and planning a detailed itinerary. It was an enormous amount of effort, but I completed each task with precision, crafting what I knew would be a seamless travel experience. On the day of our departure, my mother-in-law, completely oblivious to all the work I had put in, was excited and chattered on about the luxury seating she assumed her son had arranged. She gushed over him, praising what she thought was his meticulous planning and generosity. Meanwhile, my husband basked in the compliments, shamelessly accepting credit for the trip's organization. Despite all my effort, I stood there in silence, realizing just how little recognition I would receive for the work I had done. It became painfully clear at the airport just how much of the heavy lifting I had done. Both my husband and his mother were completely clueless about navigating the terminals and spent their time wandering aimlessly while I handled all the logistics. When it was time to board, they were still off somewhere, completely unaware. In a frantic rush to locate them, I had to ask the airport staff to make a gate announcement. Their disorganization, combined with their complete lack of appreciation, was both frustrating and embarrassing. To make things worse, they accused me of trying to secure a more comfortable flight for myself, even though they spent most of the journey pestering the flight attendants with endless requests. Once we arrived at our destination, I was hoping for some peace at the hotel after the chaos of immigration, but that hope quickly vanished. Suddenly, my husband claimed to be sick and rushed off to the bathroom, leaving me to manage all our luggage. It was confusing, especially since we had eaten the same meal. But maybe it was a little karma for his behavior on the flight. He'd spent most of it flirting with one of the attendants. As I struggled with our bags, my mother-in-law wasted no time in berating me. She accused me of being a selfish daughter-in-law, claiming that the trip was meant to be a special getaway just for her and her son, and implied that I had merely tagged along for a free ride. She even went so far as to criticize my job, suggesting I didn't really contribute anything financially. Her comments stung, especially considering the enormous effort I had put into making this trip happen in the first place. It was almost laughable when she said I didn't deserve to enjoy myself because I hadn't contributed to the planning. Then she added, "I'm not sure if I'll even enjoy this trip with you here." That was the last straw. "Fine, then I'll leave," I said calmly, without a second thought. I handed her my husband's suitcase, kept my smaller bag, and walked away. Her stunned expression was almost comical, as if she hadn't just told me to go. As I walked off, I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. It became painfully clear at the airport just how much of the heavy lifting I had done. Both my husband and his mother were completely clueless about navigating the terminals and spent their time wandering aimlessly while I handled all the logistics. When it was time to board, they were still off somewhere, completely unaware. In a frantic rush to locate them, I had to ask the airport staff to make a gate announcement. Their disorganization, combined with their complete lack of appreciation, was both frustrating and embarrassing. To make things worse, they accused me of trying to secure a more comfortable flight for myself, even though they spent most of the journey pestering the flight attendants with endless requests. Once we arrived at our destination, I was hoping for some peace at the hotel after the chaos of immigration, but that hope quickly vanished. Suddenly, my husband claimed to be sick and rushed off to the bathroom, leaving me to manage all our luggage. It was confusing, especially since we had eaten the same meal. But maybe it was a little karma for his behavior on the flight. He'd spent most of it flirting with one of the attendants. As I struggled with our bags, my mother-in-law wasted no time in berating me. She accused me of being a selfish daughter-in-law, claiming that the trip was meant to be a special getaway just for her and her son, and implied that I had merely tagged along for a free ride. She even went so far as to criticize my job, suggesting I didn't really contribute anything financially. Her comments stung, especially considering the enormous effort I had put into making this trip happen in the first place. It was almost laughable when she said I didn't deserve to enjoy myself because I hadn't contributed to the planning. Then she added, "I'm not sure if I'll even enjoy this trip with you here." That was the last straw. "Fine, then I'll leave," I said calmly, without a second thought. I handed her my husband's suitcase, kept my smaller bag, and walked away. Her stunned expression was almost comical, as if she hadn't just told me to go. As I walked off, I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. It became painfully clear at the airport just how much of the heavy lifting I had done. Both my husband and his mother were completely clueless about navigating the terminals and spent their time wandering aimlessly while I handled all the logistics. When it was time to board, they were still off somewhere, completely unaware. In a frantic rush to locate them, I had to ask the airport staff to make a gate announcement. Their disorganization, combined with their complete lack of appreciation, was both frustrating and embarrassing. To make things worse, they accused me of trying to secure a more comfortable flight for myself, even though they spent most of the journey pestering the flight attendants with endless requests. Once we arrived at our destination, I was hoping for some peace at the hotel after the chaos of immigration, but that hope quickly vanished. Suddenly, my husband claimed to be sick and rushed off to the bathroom, leaving me to manage all our luggage. It was confusing, especially since we had eaten the same meal, but maybe it was a little karma for his behavior on the flight. He'd spent most of it flirting with one of the attendants. As I struggled with our bags, my mother-in-law wasted no time in berating me. She accused me of being a selfish daughter-in-law, claiming that the trip was meant to be a special getaway just for her and her son, and implied that I had merely tagged along for a free ride. She even went so far as to criticize my job, suggesting I didn't really contribute anything financially. Her comments stung, especially considering the enormous effort I had put into making this trip happen in the first place. It was almost laughable when she said I didn't deserve to enjoy myself because I hadn't contributed to the planning. Then she added, "I'm not sure if I'll even enjoy this trip with you here." That was the last straw. "Fine, then I'll leave," I said calmly, without a second thought. I handed her my husband's suitcase, kept my smaller bag, and walked away. Her stunned expression was almost comical, as if she hadn't just told me to go. As I walked off, I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. "If you cause any more trouble or contact me again, I'll have no choice but to inform your company about your escapades. Being rejected by the dancer you admire would certainly be a blow to your ego," I warned. Frank, who had been aggressive up until then, responded with a subdued okay before hanging up. A few days later, I received a call from my ex-father-in-law. He revealed that he had divorced my ex-mother-in-law, which struck me as odd since we were no longer family. However, he felt compelled to share his findings about her true character. He had grown suspicious of her spending habits and discovered that she had drained his retirement savings on beauty treatments and cosmetic procedures. I was unfamiliar with these details and couldn't offer much insight, as I hadn't observed any noticeable changes in her. Perhaps the infrequency of our meetings had made any transformations less apparent to me. I even questioned my ex-father-in-law if he was sure the money was being used for beauty treatments. "She's spent a lot, but I don't see any visible changes. Maybe they're minor, only noticeable to her," I speculated. It seemed like a frivolous waste of money, leaving nothing behind. Naturally, my ex-mother-in-law turned to her son Frank for support. Since our divorce, Frank's financial situation has deteriorated. He's now drowning in debt and lost his apartment due to unpaid rent, forcing him and his mother to live in a rundown apartment. Despite their dire circumstances, his mother refuses to work and continues spending on beauty treatments, while Frank struggles to juggle his debts and cover their living expenses. From what I've heard, maintaining appearances remains their priority, even as their quality of life declines. Ironically, the beauty treatments have become less effective, and she now appears much older. As for me, I cherish the peace and freedom that comes with focusing on my work without interference. It's a refreshing reminder of the importance of living within one's means.
I'm a top banker, so I think I deserve to remarry a beautiful and capable woman. Being with someone like you just brings me bad luck. I'm divorcing you because you don't earn any money. What about our child? What will happen to her? I asked. Take care of Emily yourself. I'm having a new child with my girlfriend, he responded. My husband, who had left me and our daughter Emily and even got his girlfriend pregnant, announced he was remarrying. Fed up with his behavior, I decided to get a divorce. After the divorce was finalized, I still had some important things to deal with. When I went to his workplace, I saw my husband and his girlfriend, both smirking as they walked towards me. Missed me so much you came all the way to my office. You're just a housewife with no money. Probably here to take some of the savings, right? He sneered. They looked in on me like I was trash, but I stayed calm and said, I came to withdraw $12 million. What? My husband was shocked when he found out I had won a big lottery prize and started begging for forgiveness. My name is Jennifer Brown. I'm 32 years old. Since I was a child, I dreamed of working in elderly care because I wanted to help others. After high school, I went to a vocational school for elder care and achieved my dream. Working as a caregiver was tough but fulfilling, especially when patients thanked me. One day, a coworker invited me to a social event where I met my future husband, Michael Brown. My first thought was that he was handsome. I wanted to talk to him, but he seemed quiet and maybe not into social gatherings. However, as we walked to the station together, we started chatting, and I discovered he was surprisingly talkative and enjoyable to be around. Michael was shy, not distant or uninterested. I found this contrast charming. We grew close quickly and eventually decided to get married. Later on, I found out through mutual friends that Michael had another girlfriend when we first met. Discovering Michael's double life was shocking, especially since we were already married by then. Despite this, I chose to believe that he truly loved and chose me for who I am. In the early days of our marriage, we had a lot of fun together. We enjoyed going to sports games and movies, soaking in the excitement of being newlyweds. One of our shared hobbies was buying lottery tickets. It all started when we stumbled upon a lottery booth during a sports event and bought our first sports lottery ticket out of curiosity. To our surprise, we won, probably beginner's luck. Although it wasn't a huge amount, it got us hooked, and we started buying small amounts regularly. We'd sometimes decide to buy a ticket if we felt lucky that day or if our horoscope seemed promising. This became one of the few hobbies we both enjoyed together. Around our 4th year of marriage, I started thinking about fertility treatments since we were struggling to have children. But then, unexpectedly, I became pregnant with our first child. Great job, Jennifer. We're finally going to be parents, Michael said, overwhelmed with joy and tears in his eyes when the pregnancy test showed positive. I'm so happy, but let's celebrate properly after we visit the OB/GYN. I'm nervous, but I have a feeling everything will be okay. Just a hunch, I replied. The next day, filled with nerves, we went to the OB/GYN. When the doctor confirmed the pregnancy on the ultrasound and said, "Congratulations, you're pregnant," I saw it with my own eyes. I was ecstatic. I immediately texted Michael from the waiting room. I'm pregnant. Just entered the 5th week. Once we're past the risky period, we need to tell both our parents, I messaged. He read it immediately and replied, "Really? That's fantastic. I'm so happy. Thank you. Drive home safely, Jennifer." He usually took forever to reply, but this time he must have been really thrilled. I returned home, relishing in our joy. That night, we had so much to look forward to. Michael, do you hope for a boy or a girl? Tough call. I'd be happy with either, but if it's a girl, I might find it hard to let her go when she gets married. With a boy, we can play together a lot when he's little. Yeah, maybe, but if it's a girl, I'd love to talk about crushes and things like that with her. We enjoyed light-hearted conversations like this over dinner. Eventually, we found out the baby's gender. Pregnancy was tough, but with Michael's support, I had a happy and relatively smooth maternity experience. Time flew by, and I safely gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. We named her Emily. We talked about facing challenges together as a couple, but things changed after pregnancy and childbirth. I decided to quit my job as a caregiver, which had been physically demanding and involved night shifts, making it difficult to continue. This change drastically shifted Michael's attitude. When we were both working full-time, we shared household chores. But once I became a stay-at-home mom, he started saying things like, "You were home all day, right? Why didn't you clean? And you have plenty of time. Make more elaborate meals." He started criticizing me more often. As his behavior changed, our marriage slowly lost its spark. We still shared the same bed, but there was no closeness between us. I'm only here because I have nowhere else to go. I don't want to be near you, he would say. I wanted Tevin to sleep somewhere else, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. We hardly had any real conversations anymore. When I tried to talk to him, he either wouldn't listen or would give indifferent responses. Hey, I watched this drama yesterday, I'd say. Aha, he'd reply. Listen, Emily did this today, I'd add. Sure, he'd respond. Our interactions dwindled down to brief exchanges like aha and sure, with no depth or interest from his side. He rarely engaged in conversation unless he was upset. Once, when he was angry, he said, what's with this meal? It's too bland. I can't eat this. I thought less seasoning would be healthier, I explained. Shut. You can't cook, you can't clean, useless at everything. Who else would have married you, huh? He often said. Eventually, he even started treating Emily, who was only 3 years old, coldly. Daddy, look, I drew this, she would say, showing him her drawing. So what? He would respond. No child could feel close to a father like that. Despite everything, I kept trying not to upset my husband and avoid arguments. Lately, though, I've been wondering, am I just a housekeeper disguised as a stay-at-home mom? At home, he treats us like that, but outside, he's a successful banker at a major bank. My friends even envy me, saying, wow, you have a banker husband. You two are a power couple, and he seems so devoted to you, Jennifer. But that's just his public image. Once at a friend's wedding, he declared in front of everyone, Jennifer is amazing at cooking, cleaning, and laundry. She's a fantastic wife. My friends cheered, impressed. But the reality is different. He's indifferent towards Emily and me at home, behaving abusively. He's a completely different person outside, selfish and uncaring. He disappears for weekends without explanation, returns in the early hours, and never helps with household chores or childcare. During weekdays, I don't know when he finishes work or where he goes. He comes home late, and if I ask, he snaps. It's none of your business where I am or what I'm doing. Just be thankful that someone as successful as me brings money home. He even said, you're at home all day but can't even manage the household chores properly. Don't complain to someone like me, an elite. You've lost all your charm, not even looking like a woman anymore. His words shocked me, leaving me in tears the first time he said them. Despite everything, I tried numerous times to mend our relationship. However, with him rarely at home or in a bad mood early in the mornings, we grew increasingly distant, living like strangers under the same roof. People might think I should have divorced him sooner. Honestly, I'd often considered it myself, but could I, as a stay-at-home mom, raise Emily alone? Could I find a job if I started looking now? Would I be able to fulfill Emily's dreams like hobbies or college? Could I provide her with a comfortable life? These worries weighed heavily on my mind. One day, while I was alone at the supermarket doing our grocery shopping, I noticed a lottery booth tucked away in the corner with a sign that read, Lucky Day. As I stood there at the lottery booth, memories flooded back of the times when Michael and I used to buy tickets together whenever we saw that Lucky Day sign. Those were such good times, now seeming like a distant past. It struck me how much Michael had changed. Filled with a sense of desperation, I decided to buy a ticket on my own for the first time in a long while. Might as well, I thought to myself. I briefly considered telling my husband about the ticket. Perhaps if we won, it could bring back those carefree conversations we used to have, dreaming about our future plans and adventures together. Holding on to that faint hope, I headed back home. But as usual, my husband didn't return until after 10 p.m. After putting Emily to bed, I was sitting on the living room sofa watching TV when I received a call from my husband's phone. Hello, what time will you be home? I answered. Is this Michael's wife? A strange woman's voice replied. A chill ran down my spine, sensing something was wrong. Who is this? I asked. I'm Lily, Michael's girlfriend. Your husband is sleeping right next to me, the woman said. I've wanted to talk to you. I love Michael and he loves me too. Honestly, he told me you're like a maid to him and he's done with you. I think he's going to ask for a divorce soon, so you should start preparing. The shock and betrayal hit me hard as I listened to her words. I was furious with my cheating husband, though sadly, it wasn't a surprise. I had suspected his infidelity for a while. He always came home late on weekdays, was absent on weekends, and was secretive with his phone. The lack of intimacy between us only fueled my suspicions. So when Lily, his mistress, spoke so confidently and unapologetically, it disgusted me to hear how casually she admitted to their affair. Is that so? I need to hear this from Michael first. I'll hang up for now. We can discuss this more later, I managed to say, trying to keep my composure. No, talking to Michael won't change anything. In fact, I'm pregnant. It's Michael's child. Please start the divorce process soon, for the sake of our baby, she insisted. Her words stunned me. Pregnant? You must be lying. It's true. Michael has promised to support me and the baby. As a successful banker, he plans to marry me and raise our child together. It's time for a wife swap. Can you send Michael's belongings over soon? Her audacity stunned me. I had our precious daughter at home, and the thought of Michael flaunting himself as a successful banker sickened me. Too exhausted to argue or shout, I calmly asked, "All right, can you give me your address?" "Wow, you're surprisingly cooperative," she remarked. "The address is..." I noted it down and ended the call. Around midnight, Michael finally returned home. I confronted him about the call from his mistress, and he didn't hesitate to confess to the affair. Yeah, she spilled everything. I'm an elite banker, and I'm planning to marry Lily, who's beautiful and capable. I thought having someone like you, a gloomy stay-at-home mom, might be useful, but being with you just brings me bad luck. I'm divorcing you, a useless, unemployed woman. His words were like daggers piercing my heart. Bad luck? Useless? Just a stay-at-home mom. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But what about Emily, our daughter? I asked, trying to stay strong. Michael, what about Emily? You take care of Emily. I have a new child on the way with Lily. I'll pay alimony, of course. As a high earner, it's no problem for me, unlike you, he replied coldly. His complete lack of remorse and disregard for our daughter made me question if he had any humanity left. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I couldn't feel anything for a man like him anymore. I knew I had to protect Emily on my own. Michael, unprompted, began talking about Lily. Apparently, she's a 24-year-old new employee, popular and beautiful. I'm leaving you for a young and cute girl like her to start a new life, he boasted, his eyes gleaming with pride. I couldn't even muster tears after being insulted and betrayed by both my husband and his mistress. I simply wished them nothing but misery. That day, Michael packed a few things and left, saying, I'll send the divorce papers once everything's sorted. He never returned home after that, likely staying with Lily. I started preparing for the divorce process. I consulted a lawyer about alimony arrangements before officially filing, as I knew it was wise to be prepared. Following Lily's address, I sent Michael's belongings to her place and began packing to move back to my parents' house with Emily. While cleaning up, I found more of Michael's things and reached out to him. I found more of your stuff while cleaning, I texted. My mistake. I'll come pick it up tomorrow, was his casual reply. I handed over the divorce papers and Michael's belongings, feeling a mix of disbelief and disgust as I faced them both at my doorstep. Lily's words cut deep, her disregard for my feelings and the situation evident. Nice to meet you, ex-wife. I'm feeling sick from the pregnancy. Did you sign the divorce papers? Can you hurry up and finish the divorce? She said coldly. She was undeniably beautiful and much younger than me. Seeing Michael support her, pregnant with his child, only intensified my discomfort. All I wanted was for them to leave as soon as possible. Here are the divorce papers and your belongings, I said tersely, handing them over. I handed over the signed divorce papers, and Michael snatched them, hastily scrawled his signature, and tossed them back at me. There you go. Make sure to file them today, he said dismissively. Sure, I replied, trying to keep my composure. With that, they left, and I breathed a sigh of relief, knowing I had another important matter to attend to once the divorce was finalized. I received the alimony in a lump sum, which wasn't surprising given Michael's constant boasting about being an elite banker. A week later, I found myself at the bank where my ex-husband worked, handling an important task. Ignoring Michael, I focused on what I needed to do, but he couldn't resist taunting me. Miss me, you really can't let go, can you? He sneered, approaching with a smirk. Then Lily emerged from the back. Oh, look who it is. The ex-wife. What are you here for, scraping together savings? I was tired of their sarcasm. No, I'm here to collect something. What, $12 million? I declared, relishing the shock on their faces. That's right, the lottery ticket I bought on a whim at the supermarket turned out to be a jackpot winner. When Michael and I used to buy tickets together, it was a fun hobby. We checked the results eagerly. But this time, since I bought it alone, I didn't expect much and casually checked online. Then I saw the message, "Congratulations on your win." At first, I thought it was a small prize, but as I scrolled down, I couldn't believe my eyes. $12 million. I counted the digits in disbelief. $12 million. I was stunned, staring at the screen in shock. That day, I was so overwhelmed that I could barely manage any housework or childcare. The next day, I opened my laptop to double-check, and yes, it was still $12 million. I read up on what to do after winning, still feeling like I was floating on air. It all seemed surreal. I even consulted a lawyer to understand if a lottery win before finalizing the divorce would be divided as assets. They assured me that since the divorce was due to Michael's actions and our marriage had already broken down, the winnings wouldn't be subject to division. When I explained this to both of them, they were in disbelief. "What? Why didn't you tell us? That should be split between us, right? It's not fair if you get all the money." Michael protested. "That's not possible. You cheated, got your mistress pregnant, and now you expect to claim my lottery winnings. It doesn't work that way. I've already confirmed it with a lawyer," I responded firmly. "No, that's a lie," Michael shouted, his voice filled with anger. "How the hell did you win that much? You never had this kind of luck when you were with me. It's not fair that you get to keep it all. Maybe being with a gloomy woman like me wasn't your problem after all. Maybe you were the one bringing down the luck," I shot back. Lily, clearly irritated, interjected, "What's wrong with this woman, Michael? Let's go. It doesn't matter how much money she has. Come on, let's leave." But to my surprise, Michael didn't move. Instead, he said something completely unexpected. "Jennifer, I'm sorry. Let's get back together. I was wrong to belittle you and have an affair. Let's start over." "What? What are you saying? You promised to support me and the baby. You said you loved me, and now you want to go back to your ex-wife," Lily exclaimed, her voice filled with hurt and disbelief. "But with $12 million, we could quit our jobs, buy a house, get a nice car, and travel the world. It would be amazing," Michael pleaded, his eyes fixed on the money. His words disgusted me. "You truly are the worst. Living with someone like you all these years makes me sick. I'm sorry for everything. I'll treat you better from now on, I promise. Please think about it," he said, grasping my arm tightly. I was so furious that I snapped, "Don't touch me." Startled by my outburst, Michael recoiled. Just then, someone from the back heard the commotion and stepped forward. "What's happening here, Michael?" It was the branch manager. Michael and Lily looked flustered by the unexpected interruption. "It's nothing, really," Michael stammered, clearly uncomfortable under the manager's scrutiny. "I heard everything from the staff. Are you sure there's nothing going on?" the branch manager questioned, his tone serious. Michael began to explain, but the manager interrupted sharply. "I'll discuss your personal matters with Lily later," he said firmly. My ex-husband and Lily paled visibly. An affair, a pregnant mistress, and causing a scene in the bank. It was a messy situation. Tough luck, I thought. Then the branch manager turned to me. "Ma'am, I apologize deeply for the discomfort this has caused you," he said sincerely. Michael and Lily followed suit, offering their apologies. It seemed obligatory, especially after the manager had expressed regret. "Oh, it's fine," I managed to reply, feeling somewhat overwhelmed by the unexpected turn of events. "You're here to withdraw your big lottery win, right? Let me assist you," the branch manager offered graciously. With his help, I withdrew my winnings and overnight became a millionaire. Days later, my ex-husband bombarded me with calls. Initially, I ignored them, but eventually I reluctantly answered. "Hello, Jennifer? Thank God you picked up," he said urgently. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Since that day, my boss has been furious. He says someone like me harms the bank's reputation. "Isn't that awful, despite all my hard work?" he whined over the phone. I sighed heavily, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Maybe your boss has a point. Perhaps he's concerned that your actions could jeopardize the bank's integrity in the long run," I replied calmly. My response seemed to strike a nerve. "So my hard work was all for nothing, huh? Well, whatever. Your opinion on my job doesn't matter to me anymore," he retorted before I hung up. It felt satisfying to finally express my feelings. Later, through an acquaintance, I learned that my ex-husband had been demoted and transferred to a distant branch as punishment for the turmoil he caused due to his affair. Additionally, Lily, witnessing my ex-husband's attempt to reconcile with me after learning about my lottery win, confronted him in a fury. She said to him, "Actually, the baby isn't yours. Maybe I had other potential husbands, you know? I thought you were a high-flying banker, but I don't need a demoted, unstable one. I'll find someone better. Goodbye." With that, she left the bank and disappeared. Lily had entertained thoughts of remarrying my ex, believing he was an elite banker. However, upon realizing he was just an average employee with uncertain prospects, she changed her mind. It was a tale scarier than horror itself. My ex-husband was abandoned by his mistress, rejected by his wife and child, and his job was now on the line. It was a fitting consequence for his actions. With my lottery winnings, I moved into a condo with my daughter. While the money could have allowed me to stop working, I opted to stay financially responsible and soon return to my nursing career. It was important to me to save for my daughter's future and avoid unnecessary spending. However, I also wanted us to enjoy some luxury, so I planned a trip to Hawaii with my daughter and parents. Staying at a beautiful hotel and being able to treat my parents while creating lasting memories with my daughter was truly special. Looking forward, I'm eager to explore more places with my daughter, discover new interests together, and find hobbies we both enjoy. I'm excited about this new phase of life filled with happiness and adventures alongside my wonderful daughter.
My husband gave me divorce papers. His part was already filled out. If there's anything you don't like, feel free to give this out. Okay. He smiled, a smile that seemed to say he couldn't possibly be wrong. Years later, I never would have imagined that the man I married, Tatum, after an office romance, would one day make me want to slap that smile off his face. I'm Sally, a working wife married for 3 years now. We don't have kids yet. Our marriage isn't great, but it's not terrible either. My husband isn't exactly controlling, but lately he's been lazy and doesn't contribute much. It's not unusual for both spouses to share chores, but my husband refuses to help out. He still insists that housework is women's work. Maybe it's because he lived with his parents for so long, but I think it's mostly because of his influence from his family, especially his mother. When you marry someone, the type of mother-in-law you end up with can really shape your married life. It's like a luck game, and whether you get lucky or not with your mother-in-law can make a big difference. My luck? Well, it's like getting the same disappointing prize every time. Sally, can't you make a decent meal? Another miss? Today my meeting ran late, and I got home late, so when I manage to leave on time, I do cook properly. What are you talking about? For a woman, taking care of the house is more important than work. It's common sense to have dinner ready when your husband gets home. I wish that kind of common sense had stayed in the 90s. Every day after work, my mother-in-law is somehow always there. My husband gave her a spare key without consulting me, so now she comes over every day. She's always there before I arrive, but I'm too afraid to ask how early she starts settling in. Then she spends her time finding faults around the house and bombards me with criticism and snide remarks as soon as I get home. Honestly, if Tatum keeps eating like this, it's going to ruin his health. That's why I cook when I can. Sigh, my poor son, stuck with such a disappointing wife. It's frustrating. She just brushes off everything I say, like she's not even listening, and calling him my poor boy is just weird. If it happened occasionally, it might be bearable, but her coming over every single day like this is incredibly stressful. What's worse is how my husband just laughs it off and doesn't intervene. And if she's going to come over every day, the least she could do is pitch in with something. But no, she's quick to criticize and make sarcastic remarks, that she never lifts a finger to help. Sometimes she even takes portions of the dinner I've prepared. I'm so tired. Well, I'll just take this takeaway then. Hold on, if you take that, we won't have anything for dinner. That's why I keep telling you to come home earlier and cook, but today, I couldn't. Stop making excuses. Just hurry up and cook for my dear son. I'm taking this. Oh, and I'll grab the strawberries from the fridge too. Bye now. Wait, you can't just take our dinner without asking. Even after our dinner was taken, my husband didn't say a word. I'm really getting annoyed, giving him an angry look, but he just keeps grinning foolishly. It's so frustrating. Why aren't you saying anything when our dinner was taken? It's no big deal, just a little bit. It's not just a little. They took the whole thing. Then hurry up. Huh? I'm really hungry. Hurry up and make dinner, will you? I was left speechless with anger and disbelief as my husband went to the living room and flopped down on the sofa. Ugh, this is so infuriating. At least pay for the takeout. I was seething with anger, screaming in my mind. I'm fed up with my mother-in-law showing up unannounced every day, but on the rare day she doesn't come, I feel uneasy. Why is that? When I got home from work, my mother-in-law was unusually absent. My husband, who should have been home before me, was also missing. Even though it should have been peaceful, I felt a sense of unease. The reason became clear the moment I opened the fridge. It was gone. The steak I had saved for a special occasion, bought on payday, was missing from the freezer where I had stored it. There was only one possible explanation. I hurried out of the house, jumped on my bike, and pedaled as fast as I could while still being cautious. My destination was my in-laws' house, just a 7-minute bike ride away. Finally arriving there, breathless from covering the distance in 5 minutes, I wasted no time. I pushed open the unlocked front door of their house and called out, but got no response. Yet I sensed someone inside. Knowing my mother-in-law often enters our home unannounced, I went in without hesitation. What I saw inside was shocking. There it was, my steak, the package emptied and the remains lying on the table. Seeing it almost completely eaten, I couldn't help but scream. My in-laws and, strangely, my husband looked at me in surprise. "Sally, what are you doing here? Why did you barge in like this, Sally?" Ignoring their questions, I grabbed the tray that had held the steak and glared at them. This is the steak I bought, right? Did you eat it without asking?" "Oh, that? It was delicious, thank you." My mother-in-law smiled cheerfully at me, while my face burned with anger. "It's not about whether it was delicious. I bought that to share with my husband." "Why did you eat it without asking?" "It's no big deal. Tatum had some too, but I didn't get to eat any." "Hemph, serves you right for planning to eat it alone. Consider it a lesson for not buying enough for all of us. Learn from this." Why am I the one who has to learn a lesson? I looked at my husband, hoping for support, but he just grinned foolishly again. "And you? Why didn't you stop them?" "Well, I did get to have some, so it's okay if I didn't get more. There's no need to get so upset. We can just buy more." "That's not the point. It's useless. Nothing I say seems to get through to my husband." Just then, tears started welling up in my eyes, and I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. I looked up to see it was my father-in-law, always calm and quiet. I never understood what he was thinking, but I couldn't believe he joined in eating it. Or maybe he didn't know I had bought it. That's what I thought. Anyway. "Sally, next time, get a bigger piece of meat so we can all enjoy it properly," my mother-in-law commented casually. That's not the issue here at all. Do they have no sense of apology? Their selfish actions drained me so much that I couldn't even find the energy to respond. "I'm leaving. Don't you dare come barging in here again." My mother-in-law's voice rang out as I turned to leave. My husband stayed behind, mindlessly drinking beer. At that moment, I felt utterly indifferent. A few days later, I realized I needed to have a serious talk with my husband. The conversation took a surprising turn. "What?" I blurted out involuntarily. While I was out working, I unexpectedly saw my husband. Seeing him wasn't unusual. He's in sales after all. However, it was strange because he had told me he was on a business trip in another state. Why? What's going on? To make matters worse, he was walking arm in arm with a woman I didn't know. Judging by his foolish grin, it was clear they had more than just a casual relationship. I instinctively hid and listened as they approached, overhearing their conversation. "Tatum, why are you looking at me like that?" she asked. "Because you're so cute," he replied in a pathetic, lovesick tone. Their conversation continued. "Do you really want to marry me?" she questioned. "Yes, I want to marry you as soon as possible," he assured her. "Then will you get a divorce?" "Of course, I'll talk to her about it tonight." Decision made, he affirmed. It was confirmed. He was cheating. In that moment, I felt no shock at all. Instead, I realized I had fallen completely out of love with him. There was no love left for him in my heart. It was all gone. "I'm done," I thought, feeling indifferent. I knew what I had to do. First, I needed to find a moving company. After discovering my husband's affair, I promptly moved out. 3 months later, I was busy moving once again. The movers delivered my belongings, but I had to unpack everything myself. The full-service option was too costly. As I opened the first box, the doorbell rang. As expected, there they were, my husband and the two of them. Without a word, I unlocked the door and let them in. They rang the bell again upon reaching my door, so I silently opened it. Immediately, they entered. "Hey Sally, long time no see," my husband greeted me. "Wow, this place is really nice," remarked my father-in-law. "Sally, what were you thinking, running away and buying a condo without telling us?" my mother-in-law exclaimed. Yes, I had finally fulfilled my dream of buying a condo. The apartment I shared with my husband was old and worn out, and I had always hoped to move somewhere better. When I found a newly built condo that matched my dreams, I didn't hesitate to make the purchase. So when I informed my husband, he showed up uninvited with my in-laws in tow. It was exactly what I had anticipated. The three of them barged in without hesitation, but I quickly stood in front of them to block their path. "Stop right there. Only residents are allowed beyond this point." "What? Sally, what's gotten into you? That's harsh. They're my parents." My husband looked shocked. "Sorry, Tatum, but your parents are strangers to me." "Sally, how can you say that? Isn't family more important than anything?" "Other things matter more than that." "What a bad wife. Tatum, you should leave her." "Relax, Mom. But yeah, divorce might be an option. I'll ask for this condo as part of it. It's kind of small though, isn't it?" Ignoring me, my husband and his family looked around the inside of the condo near the entrance. "It would have been better if you got a two-family house, Sally. You really don't think about others." "Exactly. She's completely thoughtless, don't you think?" "Yeah, I wanted my own room too, but that's tough with this place, isn't it?" They kept talking, not noticing my disapproving look. "Well, if we divorce, we can figure something out, right?" Just as my mother-in-law reached for the doorknob leading to the living room, I gently pushed her hand away. It didn't hurt, but she looked at me shocked. "Sally, how could you push my hand away like that? What's gotten into you?" "I'm just asking you to respect our privacy and not enter without permission. You're still strangers to me," I calmly explained, unafraid of her anger. My mother-in-law stared at me, wide-eyed. "That's it. I've had enough." "Fine, if that's how you feel, then we'll really become strangers. Tatum, divorce her immediately." My husband smirked oddly at his mother's sudden outburst, but I quickly spoke before he could respond. "Don't worry, there's no need for that," I assured them. My husband looked bewildered. "I don't know what you're misunderstanding, but I'm already single." "What? How could you do that without telling me?" my husband exclaimed in surprise. My mother-in-law joined in. "Did you really do that? You can't just do whatever you want." "Yeah, that's right. Filing for divorce without my consent is invalid." "I'll take this to mediation," my father-in-law added, supporting my mother-in-law, but I had expected this. "Oh, but Tatum was the one who prepared the divorce papers." "Huh? What are you talking about? I have no idea." "Oh, so you didn't prepare it? Remember when we first got married, you said, if there's something you don't like, feel free to bring it up without hesitation." "Oh, yeah, now that you mention it." "And that's when you finally remembered, right?" my husband yelled, looking distressed. "I never thought I'd actually need it, but I'm glad I kept it since there was something I didn't like." "Why did you handle it yourself? Who does that seriously? It's not valid. Mediation, no divorce." "Well, fine. Let's settle this thoroughly before we talk about divorce, okay?" It seemed like everything had been anticipated. I pulled out documents and photos from a large envelope I had placed by the entrance. Inside were photos of my husband with his mistress and evidence of his affair. "What's this? Evidence of your affair?" my husband stammered. "Diddly well, you were the one who left home, so—" "No, the affair started long before that. I've heard a lot from this woman, your mistress, and I even have these photos." "Huh? Is that true?" After leaving home, I quickly consulted with a lawyer and hired a detective. They discovered that my husband and his mistress were meeting almost daily, making it relatively easy to gather evidence of their affair. With my lawyer beside me, I confronted the mistress. "Tatum told me he's divorcing you and marrying me. I'm so happy he's finally leaving you. That dreamy girl gave me lots of photos of the good times she spent with you." "No, that's not true." I expected a fierce battle with the mistress, but surprisingly, the conversation went smoothly due to her naivety. "Tatum will take care of my compensation and handle the paperwork, so make sure it's done." "Did you wait? I didn't agree to any of this." "Well, I did ask her to wait quietly until the divorce is finalized. No wonder she kept avoiding me whenever I tried to contact her." "I understand. The story has taken a new direction, and your explanation won't excuse your actions anymore. You're admitting you reached out to her first. That speaks volumes." Wait, listen. It's not what you think. It's not what it seems. There's no point in arguing. You have the right to contest the divorce papers, but the divorce will happen eventually. I'll also be seeking compensation and a fair division of assets. That's how it stands. Caught off guard by these unexpected developments, my husband collapsed to the floor, or rather my ex-husband now. Considering how useless he's been as a husband, I don't expect much in terms of savings, compensation, or property division. But honestly, I'm not counting on any of that anyway. My main goal is to divorce him and break away from both him and my in-laws. That's all I hope to achieve. I have a job and income, so I'll manage. I still have savings after buying the condo. I'm not worried about my future. If I can just stand up for myself against my husband, that's enough for me. With these thoughts in mind, I looked down at my stunned husband. However, it was my mother-in-law who couldn't hold back. Wait a minute, Sally. What are you talking about? Your son cheated without our knowledge, didn't he? Well, even though our son cheated, it must have been your fault too, right? It's the wife's fault for getting cheated on. Oh, is that so? Well then, could you please leave now? This is exactly what I expected. I didn't think we'd have a reasonable conversation anyway. No matter what she says, she's just a stranger now, completely unknown to me. I decisively began to usher her out, but my mother-in-law resisted strongly against my efforts. Even if you're getting divorced, you need to hand over this condo for the property division. Why should I do that? We bought this with marital funds, right? Our son has a share too. They probably don't understand the whole situation, my mother-in-law said with a smug look. Well, if we had bought this condo with savings from our marriage, then that would be true. But unfortunately for her, that's not the case. I purchased this condo with money I had before we got married, so it's not marital property to divide. Really? Yes, that's right. Both my parents passed away shortly after I started working. That's why I had planned to care for my in-laws after marriage. But facing my mother-in-law's constant attacks and snide remarks, every day shattered that resolve completely. Tatum never contributed financially to the household. Looking back now, was he spending it on his affair? Well, it doesn't matter. I've been covering almost all our living expenses, so there are no savings from our marriage. But compensation is different. Even if it's paid in installments, please ensure your son pays it promptly. I can't believe this, Sally-san. Can't you reconsider the divorce? I'll talk sternly to my son about it. Why should I? There's no benefit for me in that. But I promise to stop criticizing from now on. Well, it's too late for that now. But how about this? Let's have steak tonight. We'll treat ourselves to some high-quality meat. Do you have money for that? Well, do you have it? If you lend it to me, I'll go buy it. No way, there's no benefit for me. With a deep sigh, I calmly addressed the three pale-faced individuals. Please leave. Wait a moment, let's talk. Please leave. Just buy the meat and go, I shouted with determination, and in that instant, they all jumped up and hurriedly left. Ah, that's a relief. Afterward, my ex-husband accepted the divorce without further resistance. Mentioning a lump sum compensation payment if he didn't agree seemed to make him realize the seriousness of the situation. His mistress was furious upon learning he wouldn't cover her share of the compensation. Well, my ex-husband felt comfortable because I was covering our living expenses, but his salary wasn't high to begin with. In fact, it was even lower than mine. Someone like him couldn't afford to pay compensation, even to his mistress. Even so, since she signed the documents, I'll make sure to collect the compensation I'm owed firmly and promptly. I was worried my ex-MIL might return, knowing the condo's location, but thankfully that concern was unnecessary. It seems she aged rapidly and lost energy due to the shock. My son, struggling on a pension, came back home in tears because he couldn't afford rent either. Surrounded by two unreliable men, my ex-FIL and ex-husband, and struggling in a tough financial situation, it seems my ex-MIL doesn't have the energy to come to my house. I heard this from my ex-husband, who pleaded with me to wait for the compensation payment. Now that I've started fresh as a single person, I'm enjoying carefree days of independence at home. There's no one making snide remarks, and no one eating my groceries without permission. I'm really enjoying living alone. Maybe I'll try some local specialties next time. Freedom is truly nice, I whispered to myself. Oh, it feels so good. Freedom, I exclaimed. It feels great. Should I open another beer?
I've had enough of pinching pennies. I'm exhausted by it. When we first tied the knot, my husband praised me as a prudent and thrifty wife. But in just 3 short years, he's changed so much. Your complexion looks patchy, doesn't it? You don't take good care of your skin, do you? Are you even still a woman? Those were his parting words before he stormed out. Yet he never anticipated the regret that would follow his rash departure. Nor did he bother to ask the most important question. My name is Madison, and at 31, I hold down a full-time job. It's been a year since I divorced my husband, who is 3 years my senior, after he left me for another woman. We were married for just 3 years. Even before our marriage, I harbored ambitious dreams, and together, my husband and I worked diligently towards them, leading a modest life, never squandering a cent. You're remarkable for your age, so disciplined and frugal. My husband used to marvel, observing the steadfastness with which I managed my affairs. he was quick to envision a future together. Within a year of courtship, he proposed, and we became husband and wife. Yet, I kept my most cherished dream concealed, deeming it too far-fetched to share. I feared his ridicule if I were to divulge it. Instead, I engaged him in our frugality game, meticulously managing our finances without disclosing the ultimate purpose. As time passed and our marriage matured, my husband underwent a subtle transformation. "You still meticulously track every penny. You spend so much time with those account books," he jest, poking fun at my thriftiness. "It's almost refreshing to find an error," he'd add with a smirk, while I found solace in the precision of my records, treating it like a personal challenge. Unfazed, my husband would retreat to his phone, leaving me to my calculations. When our daughter arrived, I took on a part-time job as a newspaper delivery person to supplement our income. My early morning departures irritated my husband, but our daughter slept soundly, as if she sensed the importance of my endeavor, my dream. Through rigorous economizing and additional work, I steadily grew our savings until they reached a point where my husband couldn't scoff when I finally revealed my dream to him. "Listen, honey, there's something I need to talk to you about," I began, ready to finally share my long-held dream with my husband. But before I could say another word, he cut me off with a strange irritation in his voice. "Shut up! Are you going to lecture me about saving money again? Every day, it's save this, save that. It's getting old," he snapped. It wasn't news to me that he had grown increasingly annoyed with my frugality over the years. Sensing his frustration, I had refrained from mentioning anything about saving money for quite some time. But it seemed even the mere presence of my efforts to eliminate waste had become suffocating for him. "You act like you've achieved something when you've done nothing. What's with that smug look?" he continued, his words cutting deep. As he criticized me, I couldn't help but think how all the qualities he once admired about me had now become faults in his eyes. Every interaction with him seemed like an unwarranted attack, blaming me for things beyond my control. It was as if his perception of me had shifted drastically, while I remained unchanged. He no longer found joy in our shared endeavor of saving money. Instead, he sought distractions to vent his frustrations. It dawned on me then that perhaps he had never truly shared my values of thriftiness and stability. Maybe he was merely intrigued by the novelty of it all when we first met. I recalled a drunken confession he made once, admitting to squandering his mother's savings without her consent, despite previously claiming she had passed away. It became evident that he had always been a reckless spender, lacking in financial discipline. In realizing this, I understood that our differences in money management ran deeper than I had initially thought. It wasn't just a matter of differing viewpoints, it was a fundamental misalignment of values. After listening to my story, I foresaw my husband's growing reluctance towards our frugal lifestyle. As expected, he began to express irritation with saving money and gradually revealed his true character. Night after night, he returned home inebriated, neglecting to provide us with enough money for essentials. One evening, as he stumbled in during the wee hours, I mustered the courage to confront him. "Can you at least leave some money for our daughter's milk? You're her father, aren't you?" I pleaded. His response was dismissive, claiming his earnings as his own to spend as he pleased. Eventually, he ceased contributing to our household altogether. I couldn't ignore the flickering shadow of another woman in his life, nor his increasing belligerence towards me. It reached a point where he either absented himself for days on end or moved in with his mistress. Realizing the futility of salvaging our marriage, I made the decision to leave. I refused to remain tethered to a man who shirked his responsibilities, indulged in vices, and failed to provide for us. With both my parents gone and a baby to care for, I turned to my maternal aunt for support. Despite my reluctance to burden her, I confided in her about my predicament and asked to stay with her for a while. Understanding my plight, she welcomed me into her home, having gone through a divorce herself. I gathered my courage, filed for divorce, and moved out of the apartment I once shared with my husband. It was a rare occasion when someone visited our home during those turbulent times. Later, as the divorce proceedings unfolded, my husband contacted me, claiming he had signed the papers. We met at a cafe where he presented me with a bulging envelope from his jacket pocket, cautioning against any future disputes. Inside the envelope lay a substantial sum of money, accompanied by his declaration of intent to marry into a wealthy family. Seeing through his pitiful attempt to buy his way out of our marriage, I couldn't help but retort with biting sarcasm. If you marry into wealth, you won't need to worry about saving anymore. As those words left my lips, I couldn't shake the thought that a woman who would entertain a man like my husband couldn't possibly be as wealthy as he claimed. At best, she might be running a small business. Yet, my husband departed without a hint of love or concern for our daughter. In turn, I saw no reason to disclose to him the identity of the visitor who had graced our doorstep the day I left with our daughter. Leaving my daughter in the care of my aunt, I returned to work. One day, much to my surprise, my aunt remarked, "Since you've been here, the utility bills have decreased." I couldn't help but chuckle at her observation. I have a knack for saving money, I confessed proudly. Eager to repay my aunt's kindness, I got creative. My thrifty nature and keen eye for waste allowed me to identify areas where we could cut costs. When I shared my strategies with her, she was amazed. "I must tell my friends about this. They'll be thrilled," she exclaimed. Grateful for her support, I gathered her friends and shared my money-saving techniques with them. Their enthusiasm surpassed my expectations, and soon they were eager to spread the word to others. What started as a simple gesture of gratitude blossomed into regular lectures on financial efficiency. My aunt, impressed by my unexpected talent, proposed charging for my services. Through these lectures, I swiftly rebuilt the savings I had lost in the divorce and finally achieved my long-held dream. About a year after the divorce, while visiting a hall for one of my lectures, I noticed a man in work attire carrying materials. As I observed him casually, something about him caught my attention. As I locked eyes with the figure, I realized it was my former husband. His gaze met mine, and recognition dawned on his face. In a split second, I felt a sinking sensation in my stomach, but it was too late. A smug grin spread across his face from a distance. Desiring no conversation, I feigned ignorance and made a swift exit through the hall's exit. However, he pursued me and intercepted my path. "You don't have to run away. We're divorced," he declared with a half-smile, as if proud of some achievement I hadn't even heard of. "I've been put in charge of a company owned by my wife's father. I'm here to oversee some work with my team. I'm slated to become the company president, so I'm quite busy," he boasted, peering at me expectantly. Then, with a mocking tone, he asked about my situation. "I heard you're on welfare. Despite your penny pinching, if you can't earn, you're still going to struggle, right?" His sarcastic grin was unmistakable as he awaited my response. I furrowed my brow in disbelief. "Who are you confusing me with?" I retorted sharply. He maintained his half-smile, unfazed, and continued his barrage of accusations. "Didn't you go begging to the landlord of our old apartment for a loan?" His laughter punctuated his words. Then his demeanor shifted briefly to seriousness. "I went to collect some belongings left behind when I moved out. The landlord mentioned something about you struggling and suggested welfare. Was that not you?" His doubtful gaze scrutinized me, but I stood before him impeccably dressed, my appearance hardly resembling that of someone on welfare. I explained I had forgotten until now. "Your mother visited shortly before our divorce, seeking financial help. Out of sympathy, I obliged. She was the visitor who came when I was leaving, not a representative of my financial state." My revelation seemed to genuinely surprise him. "You're joking, right? Mom is alive, seriously. If she knew my current situation, she might demand her money back." He revealed the turmoil his mother had faced upon discovering he had squandered her diligently saved savings. As I locked eyes with my former husband in the hall, I realized with a sinking feeling that he had spotted me too. Before I could slip away, his grin widened, and he hurried over to intercept me. "No need to run off. "We're divorced," he remarked with a half smile, flaunting something I hadn't heard. "I've been put in charge of a company owned by my wife's father. I'm going to be the president, so I've got a lot on my plate," he continued, his gaze lingering on me. Then, with a mocking tone, he inquired about my situation. "I heard you're on welfare. Despite all your savings, you're still struggling, aren't you?" I furrowed my brow in response. "Who are you confusing me with?" I retorted. Unfazed, he persisted, claiming I had sought a loan from our former landlord. Amused by his accusations, I chuckled. "I was there to collect my belongings after moving out," he added, his tone shifting momentarily. "The landlord mentioned welfare. Wasn't that you?" he questioned, casting a doubtful glance my way. Dressed impeccably in recognizable brands, with my hair and nails meticulously groomed, I hardly resembled a welfare recipient. I explained, "Your mother visited our old apartment before we divorced. She needed money, and I couldn't turn her away." His incredulous expression betrayed genuine surprise. "Mom's alive. No joke. She knew how I lived now. She might want that money back," he remarked, his tone tinged with regret. His mother, who had been abandoned by her son after he squandered her savings, recounted her struggles tearfully. Despite her son's remorse, he never repaid her. Upon visiting me, she revealed her desire to reconcile, having tracked down our address through a relative. Sensing my husband's unease, I informed him that I had given her his company name, although I had left the job 3 months prior to oversee my in-laws' business. My husband appeared relieved until I disclosed that I had passed on the envelope containing the money from our divorce settlement, now belonging to his wife's family company, as a gesture of goodwill. His shock was palpable as he struggled to comprehend the depth of his mother's plight. As I recounted her situation, he grew increasingly agitated, finally breaking into a cold sweat. As I suggested informing his mother of his current employment, his phone rang, likely his current wife calling. Startled, he fumbled for his phone, his expression a mix of panic and disbelief. Suppressing a laugh, I responded, "Is she asking me to take care of her?" With a casual wave goodbye to my husband, engrossed in his phone call, I strode towards the neighboring apartment building. My husband, noticing my departure, interrupted his conversation, beckoning me to wait. "Where do you think you're going? That's an expensive building. You'll get in trouble if you go in without permission," he cautioned. Turning to face him, I revealed, "I'm the owner of this building. I've rented out all the other units, but my daughter and I reside on the top floor." His stunned silence spoke volumes. I explained that my dedication to thriftiness stemmed from a desire to purchase such a property. "I had just saved enough money to do so when you began to resist frugality," I admitted, causing him to drop his phone in shock. But I had another revelation for him. I inherited a substantial sum from my parents. Instead of squandering it, I invested in real estate, turning my savings into assets worth $5 million, I revealed, gazing up at the building proudly. My husband marveled at my success, expressing regret for not providing such a lifestyle for me himself. "Well, she can make her unlucky son pay for all the hard work he's done with millions in debt and interest," he remarked bitterly. Amidst my laughter, I offered to teach his mother money-saving techniques and share tips for growing his fledgling company. Ignoring his attempts to engage further, I entered the apartment building, leaving him stunned in the hallway. He hurried after me, but I paid him no mind, knowing he couldn't follow me inside. Once inside my home on the top floor, I promptly contacted a trusted real estate agent, grateful for the opportunities my prudent investments had afforded me. "Actually, I have an apartment I'd like to sell next. I'm considering buying a house with an ocean view. Would you be willing to discuss this with me again?" I proposed, eager to move on from the apartment now that my husband was aware of it. Though I doubted he could do anything about it, I wanted to relinquish it just in case. My aunt, having overheard my conversation, brewed a pot of tea and brought it over. I also invited the woman who had been caring for my daughter, and the three of us sat together, discussing our plans for the future amidst laughter and camaraderie. As for my husband, I never encountered him again in the hallway next to the apartment where we crossed paths. Instead, I noticed a different man overseeing the proceedings, an older gentleman. Perhaps my husband faced consequences for his actions towards his mother, or perhaps he simply moved on. Either way, it was no longer my concern. I resolved to focus on my work and continue raising my daughter in the company of trustworthy individuals who truly cared for us. With a sense of liberation and optimism for the future, I embraced the next chapter of my life.
I couldn't bear the thought of being trapped with a man who looked at my pregnant belly with such disdain, as though the very sight of me at 9 months filled him with revulsion. The cruel smile he wore only added to the bitterness. He seemed to relish this moment as if anticipating it all along. Not wanting to endure another second of his disdain, I quickly went to my room, retrieved a set of papers, and thrust them into his hands. "Divorce papers," I said curtly. Brian's face twisted in shock. "What the hell is this? Out of nowhere?" I met his anger with a steely gaze. "This was your idea, Brian. Now sign them. I'll be filing them first thing tomorrow." My voice didn't waver, even as his face flushed with fury. "You'll regret this," I added, my resolve unwavering. "Watch closely, because you'll see what it's like to be treated the way you've treated me. Let me introduce myself. My name is Linda, a 27-year-old former housewife. 3 years ago, I worked at a mobile company where I met Brian, my boss at the time. Back then, I was 25, eager to learn and grateful for Brian's guidance as a newcomer to the job. It didn't take long for our professional relationship to evolve into friendship. Soon, dinner outings turned into dates, and eventually he asked me out. I was thrilled. I had never dated anyone before. It's a little embarrassing to admit, but I was more captivated by cartoon characters than real men. Yet seeing my friends marry one by one, I felt pressured to find my own partner. When Brian entered my life, I secretly promised myself he'd be my first and only love. We married a year later, and I couldn't have been happier. Brian was handsome, popular, and the envy of many female coworkers. I felt proud to be his wife as colleagues congratulated us. Their words of admiration made me feel like I had achieved something special. I was blissfully unaware of what lay ahead. The day after our marriage registration, Brian dropped a bombshell. "You're married to me now, so you'll quit your job, right?" he said nonchalantly. I stared at him in disbelief. "I've already informed them," he added with unnerving finality. "What? But you never mentioned this before." I protested, caught off guard. Brian's stern expression silenced me. "Starting tomorrow, you won't need to go to work. I'll handle the handover." His words were like a guillotine slicing through the life I'd built. The decision had been made without me. Brian's role as my former boss made it even harder to argue. Reluctantly, I quit my job without saying proper goodbyes, determined to make our marriage work. At home, I threw myself into household chores, preparing Brian's favorite meals and trying to meet his expectations. Yet, no matter how hard I worked, he never acknowledged my efforts. I craved even a single word of appreciation, but none came. Without a personal income, I was completely reliant on him, and our relationship started to feel less like a marriage and more like that of an employer and his housemaid. Things took a turn for the worse when I fell ill one day. Exhausted and feverish, I stayed in bed, promising myself I'd catch up on the chores later. Brian stormed into the bedroom, furious. "What are you doing lying there? Get up and make some food," he barked, yanking the blanket off me. "I'm not feeling well," I murmured, hoping for compassion. "Could you handle things yourself today?" His response chilled me to the bone. "Pathetic. You don't work, and now you're lying around because of a little cold." Tears blurred my vision as I forced myself out of bed. I couldn't believe this was the same man I had fallen in love with. Overwhelmed, I completed the housework, tears streaming down my face. Several days later, I realized I'd missed my period. A pregnancy test confirmed it. I was expecting. Overjoyed, I cried tears of happiness, eager to share the news with Brian. But when he came home late one night, the smell of alcohol on his breath, my excitement dimmed. I have something important to tell you, I began hesitantly. I haven't seen a doctor yet, but I think I'm pregnant. Brian's expression darkened instantly. Pregnant? What the hell have you done? His harsh tone cut me to the core. I don't want a child. If you're going to have it, you'll be raising it alone. He spat before storming off to the bathroom. I stood there stunned. This wasn't the life I had dreamed of. This wasn't the man I thought I had married. I couldn't understand why Brian would say such cruel and irresponsible things about our baby. Moments earlier, I'd been filled with joy at the thought of becoming a mother. But his words shattered that happiness, leaving me in a pit of sorrow. Why would he react like this? He had never mentioned not wanting children before. We hadn't even been using contraception, so I'd naturally assumed he wanted kids too. As I ironed Brian's jacket and prepared to take his shirt to the wash, a wave of sadness overwhelmed me. Then something unexpected happened. A small piece of paper fell from his dress shirt pocket. I picked it up absent-mindedly, thinking it might be a receipt from his outing that night. I almost threw it away, but something caught my eye. The name on the receipt made my heart stop. A motel. My hands trembled as I stared at the incriminating slip of paper, confirming what I didn't want to believe. It was indeed a receipt from a motel. The shock hit me like a physical blow. Why would Brian go to a motel? Isn't marriage supposed to be a sacred bond between two people who love each other? We'd only been married for a little over a year. How could this happen? I was no stranger to romantic fantasies, having spent years dreaming of perfect love rather than experiencing real relationships. But now, faced with this harsh reality, I struggled to accept what was unfolding before me. The possibility that Brian was cheating began to make horrifying sense. Had he been using me from the start? Was he in love with someone else while I played the role of a convenient housemaid? Was this why he reacted so coldly to my pregnancy? These doubts swirled in my mind, and I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that there was more to Brian's behavior than met the eye. As I grappled with these thoughts, nausea swept over me, not just from morning sickness, but from the realization that my husband might have betrayed me. Perhaps his insistence that I quit my job had a sinister purpose. Maybe his mistress worked there, and he needed me out of the way. Everything seemed to click into place, and my mind blurred the lines between reality and suspicion. But the heartless words Brian had hurled at me when he learned of my pregnancy were undeniable. That day, I resolved to uncover the truth. From then on, I observed Brian's behavior with new eyes. His coldness was impossible to ignore. It was as if he resented me for becoming pregnant. Despite knowing how sick I felt, he would eat smelly foods near me, criticize my housework, and force me to redo tasks. My pregnant body endured his cruelty while my heart grew heavier by the day. But I didn't let it deter me. I began investigating his infidelity. Brian guarded his phone fiercely, never parting with it, even taking it to the bathroom, making it nearly impossible to check. I searched his pockets, hoping for more receipts or clues, but my efforts were fruitless. I even considered hiring a private investigator, but without any personal income, I couldn't afford such a step. Just when I felt trapped in my search for answers, an unexpected lifeline arrived. One day, my phone rang. It was my father. "Dad?" I said, surprised. His busy schedule rarely allowed for casual calls. "Hi, Linda. How are you?" he asked warmly. "Everything's fine," I lied. "Is something wrong? Aren't you busy with work?" "My employees are handling things well, so I'm taking it easy," he replied. My father, the CEO of a company in England, had always been a workaholic. His call was unexpected. "What's going on?" I asked, curious. Then came the shocking revelation. He told me something that made my world tilt. "Is that true?" I asked, struggling to believe what I was hearing. "Yes," he said firmly. "I wouldn't lie to you. Trust me on this." The pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. Though initially stunned, I felt a strange sense of relief. "Thank you, Dad. I'll handle it from here," I said, my voice steady with newfound resolve. The truth emboldened me, but it also reignited my anger. As the months passed, Brian's behavior remained distant and cold. His disdain for me and our unborn child never wavered, and each interaction deepened my hatred for him. At 9 months pregnant, I was always cautious around Brian, living in constant apprehension. One evening, I served dinner as usual, hoping to avoid any confrontation. But as we sat at the table, Brian suddenly slammed his fork down. "What is this?" "It's tasteless," he exclaimed, throwing the plate of food onto the floor. I froze, baffled by his outburst. Anger began to well up inside me as I looked at the discarded meal I had painstakingly prepared. "I've been meaning to say this," Brian continued, his tone laced with contempt. "Your cooking has been terrible lately." Tears stunned my eyes, but I held them back. Since becoming pregnant, I had deliberately used less seasoning to ensure healthier meals for our baby. This was only temporary, and he could easily have added salt to his portion if he wanted. But instead, he chose to humiliate me. Why? Why did he have to treat me like this? I was about to respond to Brian's harsh words when he sneered, his voice dripping with malice. "You're a woman with a belly like a monster. You'll have to raise this kid on your own." His cruel smile sent a chill down my spine. Though I had always feared this day might come, I had clung to a sliver of hope for a better outcome. Without hesitation, I went to my room, grabbed a document, and returned to him. "Here are the divorce papers," I said, thrusting the papers in front of him. Brian's face twisted in shock as he stammered, "What the hell? What's this all of a sudden?" "It was your idea," I replied firmly. "Now sign them. I'll be submitting them tomorrow." I had been contemplating divorce ever since I started suspecting Brian's infidelity, but with a baby on the way, I hadn't been sure I could support myself. Now, with a new plan in mind, my resolve was unshakable. My determination seemed to provoke him. His face flushed red with anger as he snarled, "Just watch. I'll make you regret this. Do you think you can survive without me? You've got a baby to take care of. You'll regret it." Unfazed, I held my ground. "I'll be fine. Don't worry about me," I said calmly. Irritated by my confidence, Brian snatched the papers and begrudgingly began to fill them out. "Here. If this is what you wanted, take it," he spat. "Thank you," I replied, my tone steady. Brian likely didn't believe I'd actually submit the papers, but the next day, I did just that and left the house. I moved to my parents' home, where my father, recently returned from England, had suggested I stay. It was the right decision. I was fed up of my life with Brian, and my father's support was invaluable. That day, Brian called me 5 times. I ignored every call. Eventually, he stopped trying, and it became painfully clear how little I meant to him. He was probably content with his mistress and might even remarry soon. I resolved to move on from him entirely. 5 months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby and settled into a peaceful life with my parents. Parenthood brought me joy, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly content. Then Brian called again. At first, I ignored his persistent attempts to reach me, but after several calls, I finally picked up, weary of his intrusion. "What do you want now?" I asked, my tone flat. "Hey, what's going on? Why were you on that show? And since when are you the daughter of a CEO with millions of dollars?" Brian's voice was a mix of surprise and anger. Unbeknownst to me, Brian had seen a TV show that aired after I moved back home. The program, which featured my family, highlighted my father's role as the CEO of a global tech company and estimated our family's wealth at $20 million. I hadn't anticipated Brian watching it, but TV has a way of reaching unexpected audiences. "Oh, by the way," I said nonchalantly, "I didn't tell you about my $38 million inheritance. That's why I was able to divorce you." Brian was furious. "What? That's absurd. Why didn't you tell me before? Half of that is mine, right? Give me the money now." I laughed coldly. Just as I thought. After seeing the show, all you care about is money. Gifts from parents aren't included in the property split. And don't forget your own wrongdoings, Brian. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice tinged with unease. "I'm tired of your antics," I said, my patience wearing thin. "You cheated on me, didn't you? With your new wife, your junior from work. You started dating her even before we were married." Brian was clearly shocked. He hadn't expected me to know the truth. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" I continued. "My father has connections everywhere, including in your company. I've known for a long time." I paused before delivering my final blow. "By the way, I'll be demanding child support." Brian's anger turned to denial. "Stop kidding. Why should I pay child support? You got pregnant on your own and slacked off on housework. It's all your fault." I couldn't believe I had once loved someone so devoid of common sense. Leaving him was the best decision I had ever made. "Brian," I said with a mix of anger and exhaustion, Do you even hear yourself? I'll have my lawyer handle child support. Never call me again, and you'll never see the child. Goodbye." I hung up and blocked his number, feeling a wave of relief. It was finally over. Later, I learned from a former colleague of his that Brian was struggling. His new wife was a reckless spender, and he had plunged into debt trying to keep up with her lifestyle. He had hoped to get a share of my inheritance to ease his burdens, but his plan failed miserably. While Brian wrestled with the consequences of his actions, I thrived. My father offered me a position in his company, promising to pass it down to me one day. I embraced the opportunity, ready to build a future for myself and my child. After all, I am my hardworking father's daughter. I never intended to hide my success. Growing up in a modest Boston family, I learned early on that humility and perseverance mattered more than status. My father, a mechanic, would return home with grease-stained hands and a weary smile, while my mother worked back-to-back shifts as a nurse, determined to put me through college. "Emily," she'd often say, "success isn't measured by what you own, it's defined by who you are." Her words stayed with me. By 23, I had started a tech consulting firm in my garage. 2 years later, it had grown into MTech Solutions, now worth over $200 million. Yet, I kept a low profile, preferring the quiet satisfaction of working behind the scenes. Then I met Michael. Our paths crossed at a neighborhood coffee shop. I was absorbed in reviewing contracts, dressed in my usual jeans and sweater, when he accidentally knocked over my coffee. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," he exclaimed, fumbling to save my papers. I couldn't help but laugh. "It's fine," I reassured him, even though those documents were acquisition agreements worth millions. His genuine panic was oddly charming. "Let me make it up to you," he insisted. "I'm Michael, by the way." "Emily," I said, smiling. "And sure, I'll take you up on that coffee." That coffee turned into dinner, and dinner turned into a relationship. Michael was unlike anyone I'd ever met, kind, down to earth, and a high school teacher who genuinely loved his job. He never asked about my wealth, mainly because he didn't know about it. I told him I worked as an executive assistant at MTech Solutions. It wasn't entirely untrue. I did oversee administrative tasks, though as the company's owner, not an assistant. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not what I had. Things were perfect until I met his mother, Victoria. Victoria Patterson was the picture of social ambition. Her home was filled with imitation designer goods, and her conversations revolved around imaginary connections to high society. From the start, she disapproved of me. "A secretary?" she asked during our first dinner, her tone sharp. "Michael, darling, wasn't there a surgeon's daughter I introduced you to?" "Mom," Michael said, clearly annoyed, but she pressed on. "I just think, given our family status, you should aim higher. The Pattersons have always married well." The irony wasn't lost on me. Michael had already shared the truth of their middle-class life, propped up by credit card debt and appearances. "I like my job," I replied simply. "It's fulfilling." Victoria sniffed dismissively. "Well, someone has to do those things, I suppose." Her passive-aggressive remarks became a fixture of family gatherings. At Christmas, while others received thoughtful gifts, I got a plain office planner. "For keeping your boss's schedule," she said with a smirk. Michael often apologized privately but never confronted her outright. I understood. Family dynamics can be tricky. Then came the announcement that changed everything. One Sunday dinner, Victoria stormed into the room, brandishing a newspaper. "MTech Solutions is looking for a new CEO. This is my chance." I nearly choked on my wine. While it was true we were seeking a CEO, the search was highly selective. "You're applying?" Michael asked, visibly surprised. "Of course. After 20 years in middle management, it's time I moved into the big leagues," she declared, turning to me. "Emily, put in a good word for me, would you? Though I doubt your recommendation carries much weight." I maintained a neutral expression. "I'll see what I can do." "Don't bother," she said with a wave. "I've already called in favors. The board will be impressed by my credentials." Little did she know, I was the board. The following week, Victoria arrived at MTech Solutions for her interview, dressed in an over-the-top suit. I watched from my private office as she loudly proclaimed her qualifications in the lobby. "Mrs. Patterson," my assistant called. "The board is ready for you." Victoria straightened her posture and marched into the conference room. She froze the moment she saw me seated at the head of the table, flanked by board members. "Emily," she sputtered. "What are you doing here?" "Running my company," I said evenly. "Please have a seat." Her face paled as the realization hit. This can't be. "It is," one board member confirmed. "Ms. Walker is our founder and majority shareholder." Victoria's carefully curated facade began to crumble. She stumbled into a chair as I opened her application file. "Let's discuss your qualifications," I said, my tone all business. Her resume was riddled with embellishments, and I questioned each one. Her fabricated achievements and supposed connections unraveled quickly under scrutiny. "I think we're done here," I concluded. "Your application is disqualified due to misrepresentation." "You can't do this," she cried. "This is personal." "No, it's professional," I replied. "But since you brought up personal matters, yes, I've endured your insults and condescension for months. This isn't revenge, Victoria. It's accountability." She stormed out, muttering threats about exposing me to Michael. "Go ahead," I thought, already reaching for my phone. It was time Michael knew the truth. "Mom just called me crying," Michael said as he walked into my office, his face a mixture of confusion and concern. "She said you're her boss? Emily, what's going on?" I motioned for him to sit down, taking a deep breath. "Michael, there's a lot I need to explain. I wasn't completely honest about who I am. I didn't want to complicate things between us, but now it's unavoidable. Can I show you something?" Minutes later, Michael stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows in my office, his eyes scanning the breathtaking view of the city and the nameplate on my desk. "Emily Walker, founder and CEO." He turned to the wall of awards and newspaper articles featuring my company, MTech Solutions. "So, you're not a secretary," he said, his voice measured. "No, I'm not," I admitted, standing beside him. "I founded MTech when I was 23. The company your mom mocked me for working at? I built it from the ground up." He looked at me, hurt flashing in his eyes. "Why would you hide something like this? Why lie?" "I wanted someone to see me, not my bank account," I said. "Do you know how many people have tried to get close to me because of my money or status? I wanted to experience love for who I am, not for what I own." Michael sighed, his expression softening. "I understand that, but you let my mother treat you horribly. You could have stopped this months ago." "And what would that have accomplished?" I asked. "Proving her obsession with status, right? That wealth is what defines someone's value." I didn't want to play her game. Michael ran a hand through his hair. "You're right. I should have defended you. I failed you there." Before I could respond, the office door burst open, and Victoria stormed in, dragging her husband George behind her. Her face was red with fury. "There she is, the liar, the manipulator," she screeched. George, ever the quiet observer, stepped forward. "Emily, this feels inappropriate. Using your position to reject Victoria over personal disagreements." I recorded the entire interview, I said, cutting him off. With the press of a button, Victoria's stumbling responses played over the speaker. "This wasn't personal. Your wife lied on her application and misrepresented her qualifications. The board made their decision based on facts." Victoria's face twisted with rage. "You think you've won? Just wait until everyone hears about this. The so-called genius CEO who pretended to be a secretary just to trick her way into our family." "Mom, stop," Michael's voice thundered, silencing the room. "Just stop. Do you hear yourself? You're humiliating all of us." "Humiliating? She's the liar here." Victoria spat. "No," Michael said firmly. "Emily lied about one thing, her job. You've lied about everything else. Our family status, your connections, your accomplishments. It's all been a facade, and I'm done enabling it." Victoria's mouth fell open, and George placed a hand on her shoulder. "Let's go, Victoria," he murmured. "This has gone too far. This isn't over," she hissed as he led her out. "You'll regret this, both of you." As the doors slammed behind them, silence filled the office. Michael turned to me, his face weary but resolute. I'm sorry for everything my family's put you through, but I need to know, where do we go from here? Before I could answer, my assistant buzzed in. Ms. Walker, sorry to interrupt, but Mrs. Patterson is in the lobby, causing a scene. Security is asking how to proceed. Michael and I exchanged a look. We handle it together, he said. I pressed the intercom, send security footage to my laptop and stand by. Only intervene if she disrupts operations. On the screen, we watched Victoria pacing the lobby, stopping employees to rant about me. Most ignored her, some rolling their eyes. But then she pulled out her phone. She's stealing clients, Victoria shouted, waving the phone in the air. I have proof right here, financial documents from Patterson Insurance. My blood ran cold. Those are confidential. How did she get them? Michael's face paled. She works in middle management at Patterson. She must have accessed the files. I was already dialing. Mr. Patterson, this is Emily Walker. Your employee, Victoria Patterson, is in my lobby threatening to expose confidential client information. Yes, I'll hold. Victoria's voice blared over the feed. I'll ruin her. She's been poaching our best clients. A sharp voice cut through the chaos on the screen. Victoria Patterson, a poised woman in a suit approached, flanked by two men. I'm Susan Chen, legal counsel for Patterson Insurance. You're hereby suspended pending investigation for violation of your non-disclosure agreement and attempted corporate espionage. Victoria stumbled back. No, you don't understand. We understand perfectly, Susan said coldly. Your access to confidential files has been monitored for weeks. This public outburst only confirmed our suspicions. Michael watched in stunned silence as his mother was escorted away, her protests growing fainter. He turned to me. Emily, I didn't know she was capable of this. It's not your fault, I said gently, but we need to address this openly, with your family, with mine, and with ourselves. Michael nodded, his voice steady. Together. As security led a stunned Victoria out of the building, Michael turned to me, his brow furrowed. You knew about her job performance? I found out during the merger discussions, I admitted. I planned to help her transition into a role better suited to her skills. That's part of why I kept my identity hidden. I needed to fully understand the situation before making decisions that would impact your family. Mr. Patterson, standing nearby, shook his head with a faint smile. Always thinking of others, Emily. It's one of the reasons I agreed to the merger in the first place. He straightened his jacket and added, Don't worry about Victoria. We'll handle the legal aspects with discretion for Michael's sake. After he left, silence settled in the office. Michael sat across from me, staring out the window, lost in thought. I need some time, he said at last. This is a lot. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. Take all the time you need. At the door, he paused, looking back at me. For what it's worth, I fell in love with Emily the secretary. Knowing you're Emily the CEO doesn't change that. It just means I have more to learn about you. After he left, I remained at my desk, watching the city lights flicker on as night fell. My phone buzzed. A message from George, Michael's father. Victoria's home, devastated. She knows what she's lost. When you're ready, we should talk. All of us. Family shouldn't end like this. The week that followed, I buried myself in work, giving Michael and his family the space they needed. Meanwhile, the media caught wind of Victoria's public meltdown. Corporate espionage involving two merging companies was too scandalous to ignore. Fortunately, both companies' PR teams managed to keep the damage under control. One late evening, as I was reviewing merger documents, my assistant buzzed in. Ms. Walker, the Patterson family is here to see you. They entered together, George leading with calm authority, Michael, his expression unreadable, and finally Victoria, her usual confidence replaced by a tentative, vulnerable air. She wore simple business attire, a stark contrast to her usual designer wardrobe. Emily, George began, his tone measured. We need to talk. All of us. Victoria stepped forward, wringing her hands. I've been in therapy this past week, intensive sessions. Losing the promotion, it broke me. Everything I built my identity around, my importance, my connections, it all crumbled. You tried to hold on by grabbing more, I said quietly. She nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. When I saw the CEO posting, I convinced myself I deserved it, that everyone else had been holding me back. Then learning the truth about you, It shattered what little I had left. "Mom," Michael said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder, "there's more you need to tell her." Victoria took a shaky breath. "I've struggled for years. Shopping addiction, fabricating stories about our family status. It all started when George's business hit trouble a decade ago. Instead of facing reality, I created a fantasy. It felt easier than admitting we weren't who I pretended us to be." George spoke up, his voice heavy with regret. "And I enabled it. I thought keeping up appearances would keep us afloat. But it only made things worse. The merger, is it still happening?" I nodded. Yes. Victoria's actions hurt both companies, but they don't erase 2 decades of service. The merger includes a retirement package for long-term employees. It's hers if she wants it. Victoria's eyes widened in disbelief. "After everything I've done?" "Everyone deserves a second chance," I said. "But there are conditions. Continued therapy, working with HR on a transition plan, and most importantly, honesty with yourself and others." Victoria broke down, her carefully constructed walls finally crumbling. "I'm sorry, Emily, for everything. For how I treated you, the things I said." Michael moved to my side and took my hand. "We've all learned something," he said. "Mom about honesty, Dad about enabling, me about standing up for what's right, and Emily about trusting people with the truth," I finished, moving forward. 2 months later, Victoria retired quietly. The merger proceeded smoothly, and she found new purpose volunteering at a financial literacy program, helping others avoid the mistakes she'd made. At our wedding the following spring, she gave a heartfelt speech that left few dry eyes. "A year ago, I thought status and appearances were everything, but my daughter-in-law taught me that true worth lies in how you treat others. Emily, thank you for giving our family a second chance, not because you're a CEO, but because you're a compassionate human being." Michael squeezed my hand under the table. We had rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of truth, moving past lies and pretenses. Looking around, I saw our merged family, George chatting with my father about business, Victoria helping my mother arrange flowers, our employees meeting with relatives. Success, I realized, meant nothing without people to share it with. "Happy?" Michael whispered. "Very," I replied with a grin. "Though I do miss that secretary desk sometimes." He laughed. "Well, you did say your assistant's going on maternity leave." "Don't tempt me," I teased. "I might just go undercover again." Victoria overheard and joined our laughter, genuine this time, free from pretense. She'd found something far more valuable than status: peace with who she truly was. As the celebration continued, I thought back to that first accidental coffee spill. It had led to this moment, proving that sometimes life's biggest blessings come disguised as chaos. Looking around at the people I loved, I knew success wasn't measured in dollars or titles. It was measured in second chances, hard truths, and the courage to be authentically yourself.